The Honorable, the Deputy Speaker.
Okay, as we resume, member for Laventille West, you have your additional 15 minutes. You care to avail yourself of it?
I most certainly will, but I thought I was still in original time, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
No. Excuse me. No. You just have a couple seconds, right? So you can resume with your 15 minutes.
Most obliged, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, thanking you for the green light to proceed. I was telling our colleagues in this House that the Cabinet approved a policy and some proposed amendments to the Bail Act, Chapter 460. And I was quoting from that document, which I propose now to continue. The document says, in the proposed amendments to the Bail Act, in order to address the shortfalls of the current legislative provisions with respect to bail and streamline the provisions with modern approaches that are designed to reduce the incidence of undue pretrial incarceration and to facilitate restorative justice regime, it is submitted that the new regime must include a simple process by means of which bail may be secured by the defendant of the accused, and facilitate a simple procedure for forfeiture. On this basis, this is the Cabinet of the United National Congress, so-called PP at the time. Now that the corpse is dead, the UNC. On this basis, the following amendments to the Bail Act are proposed. And remember, Mr. Speaker, it was approved by the Cabinet, led by the member for Siparia. And it says, and I quote, under the rubric, use of cash or certified check, where a court deems it appropriate or necessary to impose secured financial conditions of bail, the security provided should be in the form of cash or certified check only. The full amount of the security must be paid into the court at the time the bail is secured and held for the entire period of bail. Such security may be required whether or not the defendant or the accused is likely to remain in Trinidad and Tobago during his period of bail. In addition to payment directly into court, security may also be paid directly through the banks into an account open for that purpose in the name of the Registrar of the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago. I continue. Where the security amount is $10,000 or greater, payment should be made by certified check. This dollar amount will maintain consistency with current provisions related to anti-money laundering, enabling the defendant or the accused and the court to properly account for source of large sums of cash. UNC policy approved by the member for Siparia, and now stand up in this House criticizing it.
Member, please.
Hence, I had to withdraw comment earlier. So, when you read this, approved by the government of the UNC, led by the member for Siparia, you must understand why the terms hypocrite and vampire are opposite, applicable, without challenge. The document continues to say, these provisions will require amendments to Section 12 and 17 of the Act. The member stood up here and criticized the Attorney General for putting the amendment in Section 12, saying it ought not to be there. It says these provisions will require amendments to Section 12. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am approaching the conclusion of my own presentation. And in closing, I stood up during the presentation of the member for Siparia and asked rather calmly and soberly whether, since she criticized the name and said even the name of this bill, which is an amendment to the Bail Act, let me get it, Is it? An act to amend it. Yes, let me get the name of the bill. Exactly. The bill, Access to Bail, Amendment Bill 2017. The member for Superior told us here that that name was inappropriate, it was wrong, and it ought to be changed. I got up here and asked in sincerity and with humility, do you have a proposed name? The member said we should withdraw the whole bill, a bill that they approved in the cabinet led by her. Measures they approved, and promised in the same breath that she will come to that later. The member did no such thing, and now she has disappeared. She could not even offer another name for the bill. And that tells me, as I close, that the attack was as frenzied as I described it. Baseless, without any moral authority whatsoever, in light of what I have just read from approved UNC documents. And as such, Mr. Speaker, I commend the measures as put by the Attorney General for discussion here to all members for its support, not the least my friends on the other side who sat in the cabinet, considered this, agreed to it, approved it approved it in their cabinet on the, it was approved and confirmed. It was approved by the cabinet on March the 7th, 2013, and confirmed by the cabinet on March the 14th, 2013. Hypocrisy at its highest. I thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I recognize the member for St. Augustine.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. For those who are probably too young to remember, but for, there was an episode at the Queen's Park Oval many, many years ago that the delivery of Laventille West reminds me so totally of Newton Dow bowling to Gavaskar. He has confused the ferocity of the delivery with accuracy of the point. He has, with a horrible sleight of tongue, moved from a policy decision to one of a bill approval in the cabinet. And maybe he did not listen, and maybe the arguments were higher than he normally will be, and therefore it eluded him altogether. Mr. Deputy Speaker, nobody has said that the issue of cash bail is an atrocity. It is not. And Captain Obvious, as we will probably have to call him, has stated those things that everyone knows would be helpful. It is so obvious. But the argument for the member for Cypriot is very different. And if we were just to listen, rather than try to respond without hearing, then we, I think, would make far better law. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is without doubt that the issue of bail in this country is fraught with grave difficulty and a lot of suffering in between. And to have heard the Attorney General repeat of those persons who have found themselves afoul of the law for sometimes menial crimes but not able to access bail, it is very, very difficult in our modern day to accept these things. And therefore we need to do things better. But the point I heard the member for Cypriot make was very clear. It is this, that if we truly ascribe to the belief that all of our citizens are under our Constitution presumed innocent until proven guilty, the issue of bail must not be one of punishment, but one which is to ensure the one thing that it was always intended to be, that is to ensure the attendance at court. And having heard so many numbers, so many bits of statistics, we've not heard the most important of that statistic, which is this. How many persons who have been placed on bail, whether secured by deed, by cash, by signed bail, who have absconded? That really is the issue. How many of our citizens who have been charged for a criminal offense, put on bail, how many of them have absconded? I suspect, and with good reason to suspect, extraordinarily little in number have absconded. So the issue of absconding with bail is as a percentage. I'm sure the Attorney General will be able to furnish that figure to us at some later point. It is minuscule. And that is the point we should start at. If it is that bail, by whatever form or fashion, creates an obstruction to your liberty, because remember where I started, that you are presumed innocent and therefore should not pay a penalty until proven guilty, then that is the slate upon which we should start to write this new law. And that is the point I heard clearly the member for Cypria making. That it is good and easy to say yes because of the atrocious quality of bail access now. I will give you some live examples. When the PNM instituted prosecutions for voter padding in 2000 went on, do you know what happened? Police officers went to the court and obtained warrants not to charge under the Representation of the People's Act for a misstatement or a false statement as to address, but under the Perjury Act, took out warrants for indictable offense for perjury, and then here this one, put as a condition for bail that it could be approved only, Mr. Member for Laventille West. I share with you this, and you know, that only a clerk of the peace number 3 could grant approval. Do you know what it was? In the entire Trinidad and Tobago, there were 2 clerks of the peace, 3 in the entire country. So that if you were arrested, for instance, in Grandy, the Grandy court clerk of the peace couldn't grant that bail. You had to get the clerk of the peace in Port of Spain or the one in San Fernando to do it. So they had to bring you to Port of Spain or take you to San Fernando for that bail to be approved. And much worse, many of those persons were arrested, just like the member for Laventille West said, maliciously, on weekends, Friday evenings, and therefore had no access, some of them, to even get the opportunity to present deed, whatever it was. They had no access. So that bail and the issue of the conditions for bail have been used in a very punitive manner in the past. And we must take a very manful approach to it and deal with it. But now to abridge everything and suggest that the panacea for it all is to allow cash bail is really to not understand that there are persons in this country who are not really in the business of crime, as the member for Laventille West said from his experience, people that he acclimatizes with, repeat offenders who will go out, commit offense, get cash bail, go and commit more offense, their friends, to get money to pay for the cash bail. No, we're dealing with the fella who really, for one reason or the other, has found himself on the wrong side of the law. His family have never, ever, ever attended a police station or a courtroom, and they don't know what to do. And this thing now, you hear that they set bail, and you have to get a deed. Most of them might be in squatting districts, and I don't want to get the property taxes you get on those matters, but there are serious restrictions on those persons to access bail. But to say that those persons who in any event would not have had a deed, you can put a cash deposit for them to come up with, is saying the same thing. They don't have it, they don't have access to it. And that is what I heard the member for Cypria speaking to. And a modern approach to bail, if we are to ensure and really respect our constitutional right to the presumption of innocence, says that you must do more than just give an access to cash bail. That is what I heard. And the legislative change that we have here today is extraordinarily limited. And it is true that that was a policy paper put forward, and it is to be lauded. But there was much more, and I want to share with you, Deputy Speaker, that bill that my friend has presented here today wasn't drafted by him. It was under the hard work of the members of the LRC and the members of the Ministry of Justice. And it came to the LRC in 2015, I believe. And when we saw it, he said, no, the intent of the People's Partnership was to do far more than just do a little, plug a little hole here, plug a little hole there. It was to revamp the issue of bail access. And part of the work that had been put to be done was the issue of bail bond houses, as an example. We see in the United States, bail is set, and there are bail bond houses lawfully, legitimately recognized, and you go and you pay a fee, and they are the ones who are responsible to ensure that whatever requirements are put by the court, that you oblige and you live up to. So you have your freedom, and they are responsible. If for whatever reason you do not turn up into court, there was a show called, I think, Dog or something like that.
Yes, yes.
Dog. Bounty Hunter. Thank you very much. Where they go and they bring you back. Because it is for them to bring you back or they lose. So it was in that context and that concept that we were looking at in terms of revolutionizing the issue of bail. But there was much more. My friends have completely forgotten, as part of the effort of the People's Partnership Government, the COP being a part, it is still alive. It may be a little bit weak these days, but rest assured it's coming back up. We also introduced in this nation electronic monitoring. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, you remember what the electronic monitoring was for? It was for the very thing, for persons who may have gotten charged and couldn't access bail, that we could give them their freedom, but at the same time be monitored. For those who, and there's a bigger picture to this in terms of the parole system that we were working on to introduce, for persons who were serving time already, and because of their good conduct and so while in custody, could be given early release with proper monitoring. So these are the things, and I'm sure in that policy, if not in that one, but in other policies of the People's Partnership Government, all of these are the things that we were considering. And not just this little pinhole, prick hole in the issue of bail, and to say that it is now law that you can provide a cash deposit. Because if the Attorney General would have asked, he would have learned that this has been a practice in many courts for many, many years, to accept cash deposit. And one of the reasons for that, of course, there are persons who can in fact access the cash. It simplifies the entire process. What the member for Laventille West says is so known to everyone. There are professional bailers. You set the bail, and they're like vultures right around the court, and they tell you, look, pay 10%. If the bail is $500,000, you pay them $50,000, and they will sort out all of the documentation. I want to tell you, and it's been a long time, I'm 30 years at the bar this year. When I just became a lawyer in San Fernando, there was a particular court, a magistrate's court, that was notorious as being extremely hard, difficult, resistant to the grant of bail. You would hear that magistrate not granting bail. What you did not hear then is that after your second refusal, there was a process by which, if you had done the things that were required of you, bail would have been granted. And it is a notorious fact in South. Young Mitchell, you were probably too young to know it. That the prosecutor in the court and the persons outside worked as a team. They worked as a team. So that when you are refused bail, your family will be told, listen, if you want to get bail, this is what you have to do, you know. You have to take this one as your bailer, and on the next occasion, let your lawyer make your application, they get in bail. And we saw these things happen. So there is, in fact, tremendous corruption in the system, and we need to weed that out. And any effort made to do that, we support it, we congratulate it. But what is happening here now is that it doesn't help for the very poor who cannot access bail. There is something we call sign bail, where a court, having regard to your antecedents, having regard to the seriousness or lack of seriousness of the offense, will decide, you know what, this person is unlikely to abscond, having regard to their roots and the quality of the number of family members who've turned up to court. That's a very important thing to show support. And they will allow either mother or father to sign, once they have proper ID, you know these things, to ensure that they will return them to court. In fact, I had an experience a couple of weeks ago. I shan't call her name, but a police officer got into some trouble. And he was required by his colleagues to come in for an interview on a Friday. When he arrived, we had our 2 young lawyers with him. We were then told, this is not an interview, you are under arrest. This is a Friday afternoon. He was then told, well, we have to process you, and it appears that you may not be able to access the court, and therefore the issue of bail will probably have to be dealt with by a justice of the peace, an outside JP. But as it was, he was brought to court late in the afternoon, and I attended. And the magistrate there had to explain that we were not prepared because we had no deed or so ready at that point in time, and having regard to the hour of the day, even if you set bail, there was no possibility of accessing it over the weekend. You're right. You would be taken by involuntary transport up to the prisons, where you would spend the weekend until you return possibly on Monday for bail, or if you're lucky to have access to a JP on the Saturday for bail to be taken. And the magistrate, very wisely in the circumstances, says, do you have any family member here? We volunteered, the mother was present. And he inquired whether she had a motor vehicle and said yes. And he allowed her to sign. And he was given his freedom in a matter of minutes rather than hours or possibly days. And that is the innovative forward thinking of many of our judicial officers. So this law brings nothing new. What does it really do? It gives us a sense, because it is law, that something dramatic has changed. Nothing dramatic has changed. All it has done now is to more institutionalize the idea that the poor are more likely to be excluded from the presumption of innocence. Indeed, over the break, the member for Naparima brought to my attention a very painful case, and I'm sure member for Laventille might want to hear this. Yeah, of a gentleman who, for whatever reason, and it pained me when I saw it in the media, had gone to work, but had left his infant children, member for Laventille West. I don't know if it's from your constituency.
I think so.
And his baby went outside and drowned. And this man was arrested. Such quickness of the investigative process. He was arrested and charged. And he couldn't access bail. And cash bail, what, it was $15,000 was set? Or something. I'm sure some of the members on the other side, in a matter of 2 phone calls, that's spent out. But $15,000.
He only spent 7. He only spent 7,000.
Well, 7 or 14, right. But the man spent, and I congratulate you, member for Laventille West, for having taken some interest. And in fact, I wanted to volunteer myself, but I couldn't at the moment, and I'm still willing to. The man couldn't access the $15,000 in bail. His baby dead, and he couldn't come to a funeral. Is that it? Yeah? That is the inhumanity of some of the circumstances of the bail system in our country. That is a case that screamed out for a signed bail. This man is grieving. His baby is dead. The world is saying you are responsible. You think you can pain him more than the pain that he himself feels? And that is what I heard screaming from the conscience of the member for Siparia. For persons like that, cash bail means nothing. If it's $1,000, they can't raise it.
Except if they commit crime again.
If they commit crime.
If they are career criminals, however.
Not true.
This is a fact that fellas, when they need to get money for bail, because they have to pay the professional bailers, their colleagues, go out and put on work
Have a ring out
and
there.
pay the professional bailers so that they can come back out. Yeah. And that is why electronic monitoring is crucially important and innovative, modern thinking, and it helps us in the suppression of crime. Nobody has condemned this bill as if it was, God's derelict or Satan's own. No. What we are saying that if you come in, come much better. And they had the opportunity, and the members of the LRC will tell you the directions that we had given as to what we wanted in it. But yet it's come back with this bare-bone approach, with a fallacious belief that it dramatically improves. Sorry.
I thank you very sincerely for giving way, Member for St. Augustine. In respect of the electronic monitoring, and the Attorney General is now out of the chamber, he has stated in his published legislative agenda, it is for the discussion of the Parliament. But before he brings it, the mechanics of it, the administrative elements, the technical elements must first be put in place to comfort you.
I'm so happy to hear that the work of the People's Partnership is being...
Like that shot of 7.
It's being cultivated. No. Listen, I truly believe in the continuity of government. But too often we've had the ungracious positions when acknowledgement is not made. So that yes, there is work to be done. And therefore when you tell half of a story or a quarter of a story, you really haven't told the story. These are the things. And I want to tell you, I warn you all, there's nothing called a second term. I want to tell you all that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
As much as we had done, there was much more we wished to do. There was much we wished to do. And that we had created, we had planted, and that therefore the time for reaping, if you are fortunate to have been able to reap the benefit, well, so be it if it is used for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. However, having said all these things, it had fallen from the lips of the member for Laventille West, a man who I know knows better but behaves in a different way. When he told this chamber, and it's a repetitive thing, that the Ministry of Justice did precious little for $2 billion. Wow! Paying prison officers is precious little. The $2 billion. The budget of the Ministry of Justice paid the salaries of our prison officers. So it sounds like a big thing, $2 billion, but what is the salary percentage of that budget? It was very, very high. So don't tell a little bit of truth. Because, yeah?
Member for Laventille West, you had the opportunity. St. Augustine, proceed.
Thank you very much. So I think it's important for us to understand that yes, it's important to score political points, but let's do so on truth, not do so on other things. The Ministry of Justice was an incredible idea. It had its problems, but one of the biggest problems of this country has been the justice system. And therefore the People's Partnership took a view that having regard, if you have a big problem, you need to put the resources to fix those problems. And that was what the Justice Ministry was dedicated to doing. A lot of the legislative change that my friends have cultivated, have picked, came from the Ministry of Justice. And I want to pay recognition to some of the, well, not some, all of the members of staff of the Ministry of Justice. For the short time I was there, I thought they were incredible people, hardworking and dedicated to solving many of our intractable problems for the last several decades. They were able to manfully and womanfully take on a lot of those challenges. So I think we should put to rest this attack on the Ministry of Justice and how much money it spent. Nothing is perfect. It was a zero when we started, and it was a built ministry from the ground up. So having said that, we want to move on a little bit, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the point
You don't listen.
of the Section 4A amendment into Section 12. Having read voluminously from the Cabinet note that approved a policy that Section 12 needed to be amended. Of course Section 12 needed to be amended. And it is because of this, and with your leave, Deputy Speaker, I think it's important for us to know what section, this formidable Section 12 is. It's a very large, a very powerful section. Is Section 12 of the Bail Act, Chapter 460, and it's under the subhead of general provisions relating to bail. It says at 12.1, a person granted bail in criminal proceedings shall surrender to custody. Two, a court may require any person applying for bail to provide as a condition for bail before his release a surety to secure his surrender to custody. Three, a court may further require any person applying for bail to A, surrender his passport to the court, B, inform the court if he intends to leave the state, C, report at specified times to any police station, and comply with any requirements as appears to the court to be necessary to ensure that 1. He surrenders to custody. 2. He does not commit an offense while on bail. 3. He does not interfere with witnesses or otherwise obstruct the course of justice, whether in relation to himself or any other person. And 4. He makes himself available for the purpose of enabling inquiries or a report or any medical examination to be made to assist the court in dealing with him for the offense. But this is where it gets a little bit ridiculous. Section 4 reads, this is section 4, chapter 406, where it appears that the applicant for bail is unlikely to remain in Trinidad and Tobago until the time appointed for him to surrender to custody. He may be required before being released to bail to give security for his surrender to custody, and the security may be given by him or on his behalf. So this is a section, a subsection 4, that deals, the real subject and object of this is for persons who are unlikely to remain in Trinidad and Tobago until the time appointed for him to surrender to custody. And the point the member for Cypria was making is that the amendment under this act is amendment at section 4 of this bill says section 12 of the act is amended by inserting after subsection 4 the following subsections. 4A, therefore the interpretation reads in flow, in context with section 4 of 12 of section 12. I do not want to call too many numbers, but what I just read about a person who may not be likely to remain in Trinidad and Tobago, section 4 is that. And this is the 4A, so therefore it reads from that. The security given under subsection 4A may be in the form of here this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, cash or certified check where the amount of security is $10,000 or less. B, certified check where the amount of security is greater than $10,000. C, a bond issued by a registered financial institution as defined in the Financial Institutions Act. Or D, a charge on immovable property. What this does, all of the gallery today has heard about how this is to help all the people who are charged. But by putting it where it is put or proposed to be put, it is limited in its scope to those persons who are unlikely to remain in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore all this thing about cash deposit, about check, about $10,000, about bond under a financial institution or an immovable property, refers only to that condition for bail under subsection 4 of 12. So it has no relevance to the wider interpretation or application for others who are charged who do not fall under the category of consideration as persons who will not be or may not be in Trinidad and Tobago for their trial. And that is the point I heard clearly, because I listened with my intellect and not my emotions. Because it is obvious there is a level of animosity bordering on hate for anything that the member for Cypria says in relation to the last speaker. There seems to be nothing but insult.
The term hate and the reference you're making it to, please rephrase it, please.
Extraordinary dislike. An animosity that is bordering on contempt. Because it is, and it is important for us to sometimes identify these things, because sometimes you carry subconscious baggage. Mm-hmm. And it just, every time you open them out, it jumps out, and it comes across the members of the public as the word I use, that four-letter word. That is not an F word, but it's worse than that. H-A-T-E. Mm-hmm. We cannot have that.
Member, I just mentioned to you in terms of using the word, you have now spelled it out. Please, again, rephrase or just move on.
Thank you much. I was making the point. So therefore, a lot of the criticisms doesn't come from the idea, It comes from the person. As a friend of mine in Florida, he loves golf. His name is Ram Kudi. And he told me something that was very profound. he loves golf. He loves golf. He loves golf bad. And he says whenever he plays,
Smart guy.
what he has learned is that you never play against the players.
Okay, against yourself.
You play against the course. And you play against yourself. I want people to just reflect on that moment of wisdom in this chamber. So it doesn't matter who else around you. It doesn't matter what it is that surrounds you or consumes you. What matters is that you play the game for the sake of the game, to beat your own self and lift yourself off your own limitations. Play the course, not the player. And I've seen that happening in this parliament over and over, where many of the contributions are personal and not based on considerations of ideas. Because this country is in big trouble, because we have bad ideas, and bad people with bad ideas, and small people with small minds, who have big power and little ambition for the improvement of our people. And we need to fix these things. So, having said that, I just want to move on to another very, very important point raised by the member for Superior. It seems innocuous when one first looks at it, but it is this introduction of clause 5 of the bill, and 5.5 to make it doubly sure, where it says where a defendant has been granted bail and the security given by him has not been forfeited, the court may, if the defendant is convicted, order that the security be applied. Listen, sir. The court may order that the security be applied towards the payment of A, any fines imposed on the defendant if the defendant elects to pay the fine, or B, any compensation ordered by the court for victims of the offense committed by the defendant, and any remaining balance shall be refunded to the defendant.
Your speaking time has expired. You have an additional 15 minutes. You care to avail?
Thank you so much.
Proceed.
The member for Superior, in an almost professorial approach, with the cool demeanor that is required for intellectual clarity, said it was a constitutional issue. And it obviously is. It's not just an opinion. It's an opinion based on what we have before us. To cut it down in the simplest, lowest level, for those who do not want to understand, they will be spiteful to not understand. Because if it is, and the real example is before us, you put up money as a cash deposit for bail. Your case starts, for whatever reason you're convicted, you didn't hire the right lawyer maybe.
Laventille, what?
No, please, yes.
Oropouche. I heard. Oropouche, Couva North, sorry. Couva South, sorry. I heard the remark. Please, let's don't go down that road. St. Augustine, go ahead.
Very much. Yes, precious little time. And you are convicted. And you get an imposition, by the court of a fine or jail. You fine $30,000 for 2 months. I'll just give it as an example. But you have a $20,000 deposit for bail. That money that was put, whether by you or by someone else, the fact is that it is for you. The court, without any reference to your intent or wish, according to what we have read here, will take out of that $20,000, all of it, and put it towards your fine of 30. Is that what we're hearing? It is open to that interpretation under the way it is written. And I cannot believe that this could ever have been the intent. Because what if, first of all, that money was put up by your friend from Couva South. They say, I want you out of jail. I'll put it up and I'm convinced that you're innocent. And therefore, when you're acquitted, they will release the bail. And even if you're convicted, and there's the thing about bail, even if you are convicted, the bailor or those who put it up are entitled to the return of whatever they have put forward. Because remember where I started. Bail is not a punishment. It is not a fine. The purpose of bail is to ensure attendance at court. So the member for Couva South ensured attendance at court every single day that this case would have been called until completion. But then the magistrate, having found you guilty, and I use the magistrate's court as an example, says, you know what, that $20, whap, guys, we won. You have 10 more to pay. You have a 2-month alternative. And there may be compensatory issues.
Yeah.
But not only that, what if the defendant, now the convict, decides instead of paying a fine, 2 months, I go make my jail. It worth it for me, because I earn $1,000 a month. So like 30 months work. I will spend 2 months in jail and I wouldn't have to pay a fine. That takes away his right to do that. And my friends had the gall to suggest for a moment, this is a constitutional issue that interferes with the right to the enjoyment of your property, whomever property, without a majority of the parliament to pass it. Am I as clear as I could be, gentlemen, ladies?
Yeah, well put, man.
And therefore it is beyond peradventure. It is beyond even the simplest of our children and some of the simplest of our members to have appreciated that it is a constitutional issue, because under our constitution, no one shall be deprived of their property without due process under section 4. Under our enshrined rights, and I thank you, Couva South, for your constitution. It reads that, and I shan't go through the earlier part, but go directly to 4, which you'll leave, of course, 4A. Well, maybe I should read the whole thing, yes? It is hereby recognized and declared that in Trinidad and Tobago, they have existed and shall continue to exist without anyhow, it says the right of the individual to life, liberty, security of the personal enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except by due process of law. That is an enshrined right. And therefore, if you could take the property of the bailer and do with it what you wish, without due process, because he has no right to be heard on the matter, it is as palpably wrong as you could ever get. And therefore, it's a constitutional issue, and therefore, this section alone in its own way requires a constitutional majority if it is to be amended. So, it is easy to flippantly suggest, with the ferocity that is well known, that it has no, because it's an opinion. So even the Privy Council gives its opinion, even in the opinion of their lordships. But because they are who they are, that opinion becomes the law. But it does not derogate from anyone to have an opinion on something. But you can have opinion that you are right when you're totally wrong. But if you have an opinion based on fact and on logic, the likelihood that you are right is far greater, and therefore to be subscribed to.
That's COP logic.
It is COP logic. It is COP logic. The COP, anyhow. I don't have to study. Yeah, thank you very much. The pronouncement of death is an easy thing. But I tell you something, that the haunting that they shall face is not from the COP or from the UNC, but from the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And to use words of hypocrisy and who are vampires and everything else reminds me of section 49 of the summary offenses. You know it well. Right? They what they call the obscene language section. It is not just obscene language, but annoying language. Insultive language. And I fear, Mr. Speaker, that had we applied section 49 in this chamber, many of our friends will be requiring bail today. I thank you very much.
Member, I caught you first, so you get to go, okay? I recognize member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And thank you to contribute to this bill, the Bail Act Chapter 460, to facilitate a move away from the use of property as a means of providing security for accessing bail and the introduction of the requirement for security by way of upfront deposits of cash or certified checks. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if one were to fix or apply for bail, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one first has to fix the system that is pervading the criminal justice system. What I mean by that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that if one has to procure bail and a relative is in custody, there are certain scenarios that unfold. Take, for example, if you go to procure bail for a relative, first you will see a police officer may call a particular bailer. This bailer might call a particular justice of the peace, and the justice of the peace may call a particular attorney at law. What the justice of peace does is that he prepares a statutory declaration. That statutory declaration will say that the person who is coming to provide the bail, inverted commas, to act as a surety, is well known to the accused. And he signs straight. So the person who goes to apply to the JP and the JP prepares a statutory declaration, if you were to go looking well-dressed, you look dapper, you look with sartorial elegance, a different fee is assigned to you. Let's assume, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that you go now and you look very disheveled. You look unkempt. You look like you don't belong to anyone. You get a different fee assigned. And that is a system
Silence.
that is pervading the criminal justice system. And when the bailer, Mr. Deputy Speaker, comes and he said, okay, I am prepared to take your bail, as the member for St. Augustine says, a 10% is charged. So if it's set, the bail is set at $50,000, 10% of it is $5,000. Under Section 18, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our Bail Act states at Section 18 that it is an offense where a person agrees with another to indemnify that other person for any liability that the other may incur as a surety for a person charged with an offense. In other words, in simple words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it means that an offense both for a person to pay another to take bail and for that person paid to do so to take bail is illegal. But it has been continuing. And what we have happened in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you have what is called professional bailers. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if one were to go to San Fernando Magistrates Court, there is a notice which has been existing for over 2 years. So this bill that the Honorable Attorney General brought here today for cash is nothing new. To secure bail is nothing new, because this notice has been existing for over 2 years. And I read, with your kind leave, all cash transactions, extracts, fines, tickets, notice of evidence must be paid directly to the cashier and an official receipt will be issued. Part 2. Please be advised that all applications for bail approval must be made directly by the parties involved, meaning the bailer, relative, attorney to the clerk of the peace. Under no circumstances would any other person be allowed to have an audience with the clerk of the peace for the purpose of bail. So this Mr. Deputy Speaker, this notice had been existing for over 2 years. The question is, how many persons from 2 years back have applied for bail via cash and have received the bail, their approval for bail has been granted by the court? How many persons? Is there any data? Is there any empirical evidence? Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we do things, whether it's in law, whether in medicine, we must be not precise, we must have evidence in the sense that it must be evidence-based and you must have empirical evidence. Meaning that if, take for example, a drug that has to be tested, member for Caroni East will know you have to do a placebo. And a placebo means...
A double-blind control trial.
That is right, a controlled trial. So it's the same thing is that if you want to run and to test the effectiveness of this, you must come with some evidence. Say, yes, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, X numbers of persons apply for bail using cash, and this is what happened, how many persons were incarcerated and now out on bail. But there is no evidence.
Excellent point.
The other thing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that, again, if you were to go to San Fernando Magistrate Court, what you will see happening in first court, the number of persons who apply for bail and are not granted bail are persons who have been charged with an indictable offense. What an indictable offense is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that you are not allowed to plead your innocence nor your guilt. Who do we see coming in the San Fernando Magistrates Court, whether it's Port of Spain, San Grande, Princess Tong, Point Fortin? You would see persons who are charged with these indictable offenses, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and whose bail is not set at less than $10,000. What bail and whose bail will be set less than $10,000 will be for summary offenses, like for traffic offenses, like a simple assault, like obscene language, you will get that for less than $10,000. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the persons who cannot procure bail at any of the magistrates' court, their bail is set greater than $10,000. And who are those persons? Those are the persons who are in the lowest rung of the social ladder in this country. Those are persons who are in the lowest social standing in this country. Those are persons who cannot read nor write. They cannot spell their names. And those are persons who cannot get cash. There may be some of them who may be squatters or who have been renting. There are some of them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, who are child of a single parent, and they cannot procure the cash to come and take the bail. And this is what we are seeing. So you are trying to say we are allowing persons now to come and procure bail with cash, but the poor person cannot procure bail because they cannot afford cash. What is happening right now in this country, Mr. Deputy Speaker? People cannot even put food on their table. They don't even have money to buy bread or roti. But you want them to get cash. And I'll use even a similar example which the member for St. Augustine had used. For the child that drowned, I believe is somewhere in Laventille. The child that drowned, the father went out to work. And he had to remain incarcerated for 1 month. Because bail was set, when I double-checked just now, it was set at $75,000. Where would a poor person get $75,000 to get a person who has been charged with an offense? Willful negligence he was charged for, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Willful negligence, he went out to perhaps get money to help to mind his child. Child drunk, cannot go to the funeral. And we have another instance where a mother, she wanted to get her husband out of the jail to spend some time with a little 3-year-old child. Bail was set at $10,000. She had gone all over asking friends for that $10,000 to help her. She could not get the $10,000. Birthday passed and the child stepped into a 4th year. And that is how difficult it is with the poor persons. Poor persons cannot even get $100 is plenty for a poor person now. Because this same mother, the example I've used here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this mother, she complained about when she went to apply for the bail, is that the clerk of the peace is asking her to provide a list or a bank statement of the last 6 months of the balance that is posted on the bail, meaning that the bail is $10,000, but she must provide a statement for the last 6 months to show that there was a balance of $10,000. Where would she get $10,000 to continuously have it as a balance? She cannot, as I say, provide even for her child. She cannot even pay rent. She cannot buy food. And she cannot even pay her phone bill for us to do anything with roaming. So that is how difficult it is, Madam, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are those when they put their property up to secure and to procure bail. What happens? Take, for example, I like to use examples, perhaps being a lecturer once. It makes it easier. Mr. Deputy Speaker,
proceed, member.
Take, for example, when a movable property is used, like we have section 12 of the bill here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and section 4D, you can also use a charge on immovable property. There are those who have used land, and I have known of instances, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Take, for example, an old man. He has given his deed, and of course the deed must be cleared, no mortgage in it. It must not be encumbered. So he has given his deed to procure bail for a relative of his. What happens is that the case I know about is that it's 8 years now, and this matter has not even started at the magistrate court. So it's 8 years, his land is being held by the court as surety, and the matter has not started. He is getting older, and he is trying in the best of ways to get this bail revoked. But he cannot. Why he cannot get it revoked, Mr. Deputy Speaker? It's because a magistrate is a creature of statute. And a magistrate is guided by statute. So the onus now rests on the bailer who had taken the bail to come and prove that the person who he has taken the bail for is a flight risk. So imagine you have your property. The matter cannot start in 8 years, and you cannot get your property back. So he's getting older, and as the member for St. Joseph will know about non-communicable diseases, the person is getting older, he has heart disease, he has high blood pressure and diabetes. And he's...
Silence. Silence. Members. Prakash, one, please. Proceed, member for Oropouche West.
Thank you.
So the old man can't get back the property.
So he cannot get his property released. So what happens in that instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker? He may die. He may die testate or he may die intestate. If he dies testate, he has to probate his will. And if he dies intestate, a letter of administration has to be done. So he has, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member for St. Joseph. Member for St. Joseph.
Non-communicable diseases like a catch on.
See that?
Silence and proceed, Oropouche West.
Yes, thank you. So the executor or executrix of his will, Mr. Deputy Speaker, will probate the will. The personal representative will do letters of administration. But when it's time now to do a deed of assent or a memorandum of assent, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it cannot be done because the land becomes encumbered and it remains encumbered. So maybe the Honorable Attorney General, when he's winding up, perhaps he could address that issue and say whether those who have given their land can now come and ask not for the bail to be revoked, but the bail to be substituted, and if cash can be paid instead. Yeah. You cannot revoke, and so we need to know whether there'll be a substitution for cash and for land, to replace the land with the cash. Mr. Deputy Speaker, another important aspect of this bill with respect to cash being 10,000 less and 10,000 greater than 10,000 is with respect to trafficking offenses. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sometimes what we have found is that police may set up roadblocks, and they set up roadblocks close to a school zone. And what happens is that they might stop a young man and find one cigarette of marijuana in his vehicle. And what is the offense? He would be charged for the possession of this one cigarette, but for the purpose of trafficking. And the bail that is set for trafficking would be about $150,000. So you have a young man, you're not sure why he's using the cigarette, maybe for some medicinal reason. Maybe he has epilepsy or he may have asthma. I'm not here to advocate the legality and to legalize marijuana, but there may be some reason. But he is placed on a bail of $150,000. Where is he going to get that money? For the possession of one, because it's close to a school zone and he is charged for trafficking.
The police set them up.
And that is another issue.
Police set them up. Put it in those.
So what we are saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that persons who are charged with trafficking, not with a simple cigarette example I've used for you, but the main traffickers who are doing narcotics and so, they will welcome cash bail because they will have readily available cash, but not that the little young man there who cannot, and he would remain incarcerated because he cannot post that $150,000. Those who are charged with trafficking kilograms of marijuana and narcotics and so will welcome this. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look at this, let me just get it right. We always know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I need to explain or to revert to one quotation that the Honorable Attorney General had said. And it was made on February 6, 2017. And he spoke about bail by cash. And he said there is an allegation and a statement that there is almost an underground element to the manner in which bail is procured. There is a phenomenon of what people refer to as professional bailers, because the magistracy has sought to opt to one version of bail only. That is the production of deed of property. What this access to bail amendment bill allows is for the placement of cash or certified checks into the judicial system. He said, the Honorable AG, that this will be placed in the prison themselves to access bail under the new system every day except Sundays and public holidays. The Honorable Attorney General went on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and said that there were 2,242 prisoners currently in remand yard. 1,000 were there for non-bailable offense, and 1,242 remaining prisoners, nearly half, had been granted bail by the courts and could not get it. And I will like to remind this August House that when we did the anti-gang and bail amendment bill, I think it fell through in this halfway through when the Honorable Attorney General was speaking. There was all this fanfare that because there is a sunset clause, which would have expired on the 15th of August 2016, that prisoners or those who have been incarcerated at the expiration of the sunset clause would all be running out looking and to seek bail, and they will be outside there and they will cause havoc and the crime rate will increase. But there we have it. The Attorney General is saying those same people who could have gotten bail and would have access to bail could not get it. Again, it's because of the kinds of persons of the lowest social strata that are present there. They cannot procure the bail. In fact, on July 23rd, 2016, in Newsday, the Attorney General went on to say that the judiciary is placed on high alert to deal with a rush of bail applications, and there was a security concern. He went on to say it's going to be a big event in the country. Big event, small event, nothing happened, Mr. Deputy Speaker. All those persons that are still there waiting to procure bail, and because of the state of affairs, their economic state of affairs, they cannot procure the bail. So what do we do, Mr. Deputy Speaker? How is it that we can help resolve what is happening in the criminal justice system? Because this morning, the Honorable Attorney General said that he was bringing this package of laws to improve the criminal justice system. He was going to remove all the obstructive time frame in doing these matters, because he actually said there were some 20 years backlog of cases, both in the magistracy and in the High Court. And of course, he spoke about directly to the constitutional rights of persons, because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we know that if one is arrested for a bailable offense, then that person is entitled to bail if it's a bailable offense. Non-bailables like murder and treason and so, but every non-bailable offense, every bailable offense, that person is entitled to it. And he has that right under the Constitution, Section 5. It is enshrined in the Constitution of your right to be brought promptly to court and that presumption of innocence. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have to have some solutions. How are we going to deal with matters of this nature? How are we going to remove the mystery that surrounds the granting of the bail? And what we need to do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that perhaps persons who have a first offense, perhaps they can post bail, cash bail for themselves. And first offense meaning not actual violence. So those persons who have committed perhaps minor offenses, that they can do, they post their bail for themselves. And what we have seen also in the United States, we have what is called bail bondsmen. It is a system that 10 to 15% is contributed. So the person who wants to go and procure bail for his relative, he gets 10 to 15%, which is aided to help in procuring the bail for the relatively poor ones. So what we need is that these bail bondsmen, whether it's an agent, whether it's an institute, these persons have a contractual relationship or a contractual agreement with the court and a contractual agreement with a financial institution. So what happens is that beyond work hours or opening or operating hours, this bail bondsman, they will have that relationship, which is a 24/7 relationship, so they can continue to have monies and cash to take the bail for the person. So, because what we see here in the fourth schedule, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we see the act is amended by inserting after the third schedule, the following schedule, we see that the days and times during which persons may give security for bail at prisons. We are seeing Monday to Friday, 8 to 6, and we are seeing Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. But in Trinidad, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if an offense were to be committed Friday evening, I don't know where we have any institution that may be open on a Saturday if you have to get cash between 8 and 4 p.m. Where are you going to get the cash to post bail, especially if it's beyond $10,000 and you have to do a certified check? So the bail bondsman is one of the ways in which perhaps we can ameliorate or to cure that problem of the time where we have here Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also, the Honorable Member for St. Augustine has also spoken about the tracking. And I believe the member for Laventille West stood up very quickly to talk about the electronic monitoring of persons. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we find in the criminal justice system is a whole cadre of problems. What we are seeing is that no matter how we try to bring a suite of legislation, which mightn't be so sweet, what we are seeing is that it is just bottlenecking. No matter what bill or act we're trying to to bring before the criminal justice system to see how we could cure the ills of it, nothing really can resolve it in a timely fashion because it is cumulative. It's over the years, nothing has been happening in the criminal justice system.
Hi, member, your initial 30 minutes has expired. You have an additional 15. You care to avail yourself?
Yeah,
member.
To just summarize.
Summarize, so
Yeah,
proceed.
Yeah. So Mr. Deputy Speaker, we saw the indictable proceedings bill, we saw plea bargaining here, we're seeing this bail bill, and we have this whole cadre of bills and which will soon be acts, and we are trying to see whether these things could resolve or to try and dilute and to see how this whole criminal justice system can be unclogged. Because we're looking also to see the DPP office cannot even deal with all these matters. We're seeing the criminal, the high court, the appeal court, the magistracy, backlog of cases. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill as it stands, it needs to have certain amendments, and how it stands here, because there are certain sections which the Honorable Member for Siparia and the Member for St. Augustine had already dealt with, the constitutional rights, the infringement of the constitutional rights of persons. And with those few words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you.
Before I recognize the member for point 14, I just want to remind members of the House of Standing Order number 53E, that when members are speaking, members shall maintain silence while another member is speaking. Right, so members please, and according to the procedural bulletin submitted by the chair, number 3, please, let's ensure that the decorum is maintained in the House. So member for point 14.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise to support the Bail, Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me first of all compliment the Attorney General for once again bringing a menu of legislation that is geared towards dealing with the whole situation of crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. We continue to see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what I consider a whole of government approach, as the Attorney General brings in this House the legislative framework. From the Ministry of National Security side, we continue to trust the operational side, and together we ride on the same train. Together we continue on the same vein to treat with the whole issue of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill seeks to amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460, to facilitate a change from the use of property as means of providing security for accessing bail to the use of upfront deposit of cash or certified check. Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I go into the bill, I have to when I look at what the member for Siparia mentioned in terms of this bill as a retrograde step. She may have used the right word, retrograde, but I think in terms of the members on the other side, I believe that they are suffering to a large extent with retrograde amnesia, which is a loss of memory with respect to events that occurred before. Because you have heard the member for Laventille West bring to this House that they, in fact, through a cabinet note, to approve the very same bill that we're dealing with today. Yet, they consistently seems to forget, as I said, retrograde amnesia. They consistently forget that they too would have had presented the very same issues. And now that they are on the other side, amnesia steps in so that they completely forget what has occurred before. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it reminds me very much of our attempt in this very House at another time to deal with the anti-gang and the bail bill, where the very same opposition who supported the bill then refused to support it at a time when it was required in this country. It's truly retrograde amnesia, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think I want to locate the whole idea of this bill, and we have seemed to have heard a number of legal frameworks treating with the bill, and while it is a legal instrument that we're dealing with, I think there's a social aspect to it. But I want to locate it within what's the security landscape now. And first of all, I looked at what's the situation, and I know the Attorney General mentioned it some time ago. What is the situation in our remand prisons right now? The total number of remandees in our 9 institutions are just over 2,000 plus in remand alone. In Golden Grove alone, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are approximately 960 remandees. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the remand prison, which was constructed many years ago, in fact, many people don't know that the remand prison was in fact an air base for people who served there in the Second World War. It was really that was the structure, and the structure was then created, outfitted, the very same shell was outfitted to host prisoners, remandees. Their rooms are in fact a 10 by 10 rooms, designed to hold 3 prisoners. To date, there are about 9 plus prisoners in that very same 10 by 10 room. There are about almost 9 to 10 prisoners in that very same 10 by 10 cell, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There is no doubt that the remand prison is overcrowded at this point in time. When you look at the cost of someone being held in remand prison, on a daily basis, it costs about $618 per person. Of a monthly, roughly 18,000 plus per month. Annual cost is 225,920.40. When one looks at the cost, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the fact that the remand prisons in which we are dealing with today with respect to bail is overcrowded, one can understand the situation that we're dealing with, which to some extent contributes to what I call what's happening in the security environment. So, Deputy Speaker, added to that, I want to do some statistics from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with respect to arrests. So we get an idea as to the amount of people that has to go through the system, because at the end of the day, it is based on the police arrest that people are sent into the remand yard. So I want to give you an idea as to what that looks like. And I use as the base year 2014. So, Deputy Speaker, in 2014, a total of 10,986 persons were arrested and charged by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. 10,986. In 2015, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a total of 10,942 persons were arrested and charged. In 2016, a total of 10,679 persons were arrested and charged, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To date, in 2017, there's a total of 4,192 persons were arrested and charged. I say that so that the public, so that we in the House can get an understanding. The volume of the amount of people who are being charged by the Trinidad Police Service, arrested and charged. I can tell you a fraction of those people end up in the remand yard. And a remand yard that is already crowded, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we have to understand what we are treating with and what we are trying to remedy here by the amendment to the bail bill. By the amendment to the bail bill. What the amendment to the bail bill seeks to do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is in fact to close a gap, or as they say in legal terms, and I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of imagination, a lacune, I think is the correct word, a gap within the law. Because as it says, the Bail Act does not make provisions for the forms by which bail may be secured. And as such, what the Bail Amendment Act is trying to do is to amend Section 12 by inserting 6 new subsections. Section 4A, which speaks to cash or certified check where the amount of security is $10,000 or less. And Section 4B, Section 4C, Section 4D, Section 4E. I mean, these have already been stated already, so no need for me to repeat them. But what the Act is trying to do is to fill that gap. To fill that gap so that at the end of the day, we can address issues pertinent to the remand yard, pertinent to the amount of arrests that the Trinidad and Tobago Police service handlers in any 1 year or any one period, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, so therefore we can see the relationship between the amendments and, in fact, between what happens in the crime in the security environment in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think one of the other things that's missing in this debate is the people issues. The people issues. For a number of issues that were dealt before seem to address the legal issues in the absence of how does this situation affect the individual? How does it affect the family? How does it affect the communities? And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to bring into debate that the whole question of people who are held without bail, at the level of the individual, I believe one of our first responsibility is to the individual, who to a large extent expects our care and protection, expect us to protect and serve with pride to a large extent, and to hold and treat them. But more importantly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to be able to consider their health concerns, because persons who are incarcerated, especially those who are unable to secure bail, to a large extent a degree of stress, a degree of worry steps in. To some extent even mental illness steps in. I'm drawing this reference because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the Minister of National Security, at the end of the day, these people end up contributing to crime and criminality because of the stress they are placed in as an individual in the confines of remand yard and so on. But there is a nexus. And so what, again, I continue to emphasize that what this bill is trying to do is, again, prevent this from happening, or give them some way, or some measures of relief, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You can see that persons who are so incarcerated experience financial difficulties, loss of employment, because, for instance, a young person who appeared before the court on some minor offenses and placed in remand yard, he may have been employed for some period of time. During that time, he lost the benefit of being employed. He lost the opportunity to earn his own income. And for what? For a very small infraction. The Attorney General mentioned thousands or hundreds of thousands of traffic offenses. The Attorney General mentioned in terms of minor infringement of the law. Persons are held in remand yard for 5 years and 6 years and 7 years. Some of those persons may be young people who have been employed, and therefore they lose the opportunity to gain employment, to secure their own future. So future earnings are destroyed. This amendment would assist so that they themselves will be able to continue their employment, even while pending their court appearance, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To some extent, people have experienced loss of housing, for instance, because being placed in remand yard and so on. The ability to their pre-trial detention they've lost opportunities to gain what we call basic shelters, basic accommodation. And sometimes you'll find that the very same people, because of that lost opportunities, may end up as street dwellers, for instance, again, in an area where they can contribute to crime and criminality. So what I'm doing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is doing the kind of relationship between what we're doing, crime and criminality, because at the end of the day, this is what we are trying to reduce. Between the Attorney General's legislative framework and national security operation, we are trying to reduce the incidence of people committing crimes in Trinidad and Tobago. When we look at the issue of families, for instance, the effect of persons being incarcerated in remand yard and so on affects the families. So we leave it with the individual and look at the effect of the families. Separation from one families, of course, can strain communication and to a large extent destroy households. When fathers or mothers are placed in remand or pre-trial detentions, or even sons or daughters, it affects the family. It affects the family as a whole. And even that, again, you see the breakup of family again leads to a certain kind of behavior that again can contribute and add to our dealing with crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. So that the amendments being provided here, again, is to bring relief to the family also. It's also to bring relief to the communities, because at the end of the day, the families are a microcosm of the community. And therefore, what affects the community in terms of people being incarcerated for whatever offenses, it also affects that. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our interest is to ensure that we do not contribute to creating the environment where people are placed in to contribute towards a life of crime and criminality. See, the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is in the business of dismantling gangs, not in the business of dismantling families. And so we believe that, and I can tell you outright, that I support the Attorney General in terms of this bill, that he has this amendment that he has brought to this House. Because I believe, and I strongly believe, that it will contribute, it will definitely contribute in our fight against crime from another level, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so as we look at the data to some extent, the data suggests to us that roughly about 70 to 75 persons who are accused of possessions of crimes, of acquisition or other non-serious offenses, most of them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are in fact can be affected and can have access to what we are presenting here in this bill amendment. And that, to my mind, would have a very important effect. Because when you look at the situation in remand yard, and we say it all the time, we talk about remand yard being almost like a factory, like an institution, where the persons who were there for slight infractions, sometimes first offenders, would go into remand yard. Never had, really before that infringement, have led a life of crime and so on. But when they return to their communities, they become hardened criminals. And I mean, there are test cases to show that. And when you look at, and if, I don't know how many people here have seen remand yard. I have seen it. I've been to remand yard. I know how many of us have seen it. I did a tour of that since becoming Minister of National Security. And it's not a sight that you would want to see. As I mentioned before, a 10 by 10 room that was designed for 3 individuals now hosts about 9, sometimes 10. Sometimes 10. And remember, as I said, that's an institution that was built in the days for airmen in the Second World War. So that they are not communal, they're not single bathrooms, as we say, single toilets, communal toilets, which is what we're trying to change. I'll come to that in a while to address those issues. Yeah? So that the overcrowdedness that we're talking about is something that we must bring relief to, if we have to do that legislatively by amendment to the Bail Act. And I've heard members on the other side talk about almost singling that this is what this alone can't do it. And we're aware of that. It must be a combination of efforts. Different kind of approaches to treat that situation. This is just one of many approaches. This is just one of many approaches to treat the issue of overcrowdedness in our cells. Because the bulk of our issues in our prison system is not the convicted prisoners. Not the convicted prisoners. The bulk of the issues are those on remand who have been waiting for so many years for the trial to take place. And the Attorney General mentioned as much as 20 years in some instances. Because imagine that you are inside and you have been in pre-trial mode for 15, 20 years. Unable to see your loved ones, your family is gone, you don't know what's happening to them and so on. And in an overcrowded facility, your mental state, of course, would be affected. So you either be, again, a survival of the fittest to some extent. So what kind of individual do you say? And we as a society must have a responsibility to treat with that. We must be able to treat with that. And if we're bringing measures to treat with that in this House, measures that the opposition have themselves approved, I think this debate is a simple debate, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I think this is a very simple debate. But if, again, we are suffering from amnesia, then I understand why we have to go wrong and wrong until maybe we have to juggle the memory a bit so that they can return to their moorings. One that treats with the issue of the people. We're not talking about the legal. I mean, we have many lawyers in the House. But there need to be some social scientists thinking at times. There need to be some social moorings at times. And not think about just the legal part of these arguments. So, Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, sometimes you look at even the cost of the defendants themselves, because they too, the defendants themselves, for time spent in prisons, cost of jobs, cost of family, cost of relationships, and yet the matter has not been concluded as yet. So there's a cost to them, there's a cost to their families, serious social costs and serious social implications, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So that when we look at what we're trying to do with the proposed section 4B to F, which is meant to ensure that persons who want access to bail have the opportunity to do so. I mean, I mentioned a while ago that cashiers and so on close at 3 p.m. and so on. You've seen where they've introduced, where, and which is new, I believe, you can now make payment through a designated, either prison commissioner or the designated officer. Not only on a Friday, but on a Saturday. And the member for Oropouche West, Royal Bank is open on a Saturday. So if you're wondering where they can get money, there are banks that are open on Saturdays now. And I mean, technology has also ATM to where you can draw X amount from it. Yeah. But you can do that. So there are avenues. But what is more important is getting rid of a system whereby 3 o'clock on a Friday, cash are closed, and therefore you have to stay incarcerated until Monday, as the case may be. Now you've seen an improvement in that system. There is an improvement, and you can't deny that. If you know, you could now be able to make payments to either the commissioner of prison or his designate up to on Saturday mornings, as well as I think 5 o'clock or so on a Friday afternoon. So that you are seeing some changes that again would allow for a reduction, would allow for preventing people from being sent to remand yard. When you look at clause 5, it is meant to ensure inter alia that the security used to acquire bail can be set off against fines or be paid straight to the comptroller of accounts as part of revenue. But also, it permits the court a discretion to forfeit a part of the value of the security which previously did not exist. Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you're seeing something different taking place. You're seeing something new taking place. Because see, this is important, as in some instances the bail figure may be high. But it allows, again, forfeiture from part of that. So there again, you can see some relief insofar as that is concerned. Because this measure permits the court to treat the forfeiture in a fair and just manner, Mr. Deputy Speaker. See, government is not in the business of pawn arrangement, whereby a person's property has to be seized, evaluated, marketed, and sold. We are not in the business of foreclosure, neither. We are in the revenue-making business. And I believe this speaks for itself, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In addition, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in relation to the forfeiture of the security for payment of fines, where fine is imposed on someone, they can apply for extension if the fine is not paid. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we must look at these measures in a cumulative manner and not in an isolated manner. Because what these measures are bringing to bear at the end of the day is to treat with the issues of overcrowding, treat with the issues of treatment of the individuals who are still innocent, have not been proven guilty. I mean, I'm losing that fundamental right of the individual. We are treating individuals who have not been convicted in the courts as yet. They are still innocent until proven guilty. And if those who, especially those who are in minor infractions, first-time offenders, people who we can still salvage, people who we can still save, if we can do so, I think there's a responsibility on us as a society and as a government, and we're doing that as a government, and I hope the opposition is just as responsible as us to save those people, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To save those people, Mr. Deputy Speaker. See, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what on the other side is the Ministry of National Security doing? What is the Ministry of National Security doing? Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Hello. Member, leave the chamber, please. Proceed, member, for point 14.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
And members, please, electronic devices. the rule continue that it ought to be on silent or muted accordingly. Go ahead, member for point 14.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, again, as I mentioned a while ago, we have adopted a whole of government approach. And that is, it is manifested here by national security working together with the Attorney General. Where, as I said before, legislative framework, operational aspect.
Member for Oropouche East. After I spoke this 3 times within that short space. Please, point 14.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, as I said, the whole of government approach is working and manifesting itself here today, where you are seeing the legislative framework taking place, and also the operational aspect from the Ministry of National Security. And so I want to highlight that the Ministry of National Security, in looking at the same issues, have in fact advanced the whole question of electronic monitoring devices. And I said advance because, you see, I hear the member for St. Augustine mention that electronic monitoring bracelet and so on. Yes, it was in fact the Administration of Justice Act 2012 was ascended to in July 2012 by the last administration. 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, nothing happened. Yes, you started it, that's fine. Nothing happened. 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. Nothing happened. But what has happened since then? In 2016, what has happened? An implementation committee was formally established on August the 5th, 2016. The committee comprises representatives of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, Director of Public Prosecutions, the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and other members of the Ministry of National Security. Not only that, but a building to accommodate the unit has in fact been identified. The electronic monitoring unit, we now have a manager who has been hired. Thank you very much. Has been hired. Deputy electronic manager has also been hired. And they are in fact staffing out that unit right now. They already started preparing regulations for the unit. And I can tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can tell you that before the end of this year, this unit will be up and running and contribute significantly to the administration. We are right now looking at we have engaged 3 governments outside USA, UK, and Canada. We have cut away the middleman, deal directly with the governments who have had this electronic monitoring mechanism installed already. And we're looking at 3 providers. We're assessing that right now, evaluating them, and select whichever we feel is better, what's best for us. At the end of that selection process, after the evaluation has taken place, we then will engage the local telecommunication industry, because we have to have a service provider to provide the platform in which we operate in. And then, of course, the police at the same time is developing a mechanism to do the response, so that if anyone breaks what we call the geofence with the electronic magnetic bracelet, there's a response mechanism. So all of this taking place, and I can tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this will come into effect before the end of the fiscal year. And that's a government that insists on ensuring that we deal with the issues, so that between 2015 and 2016, you have seen what we have done, which you did not do 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. But again, we did not throw away what we did, because we are a responsible government. We use what we did, but we advance on it, unlike what you have done with my offshore patrol vessels. No. You got rid of them, and Brazil is happy with them right now. You dumped them without any reason or justification. If you had only continued the vein and you did like a responsible government, those offshore patrol vessels would have done a lot for us in this maritime security environment today. I know you were sorry that you did it afterwards, when you understood that you made the blunder of the day. I know that you made a blunder of the day by getting rid of those offshore patrol vessels. But again, no, he wasn't the one that got rid of them, wasn't it?
Silence.
I know who got rid of them.
Silence, and member for point 14, address the chair. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, when I remember the offshore patrol vessels, I got kind of emotional because I was involved I was a CDS at the time, so I knew it was a blunder that they lived to regret. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I mentioned, the implementation committee with respect to this place is in fact currently developing policy in respect to the regulations, and by the end of this month, May 31st, the brief is to be provided to the legal unit to the implementation committee. So we are working. We are working. The other thing that the ministry is doing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is in fact looking at the situation at the remand prison. Looking at the situation in the remand prison. And so we have looked at not just refurbishing, but bringing the remand prison into modern day standard, where prisoners have individuals, they're still using pails up there, I might add. Oh yes, they do. Imagine 10 people. The AG mentioned vertical sleeping in a razor blade position. We have to improve the condition, and that's part of the remit of the national security, Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. We have to. So we are looking at the remand prison right now in terms of creating the kind of accommodation, the kind of space that would not contribute to their mental state, that would not contribute to the factory where you build and you continue to turn out more hardened criminals before they went into that sort of environment. And so, in fact, a notice before Cabinet right now, with a certain kind of expenditure to treat with refurbishing the remand yard right now, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because we understand the people issues. We understand what that would do if we continue to live in that environment, how that would contribute to the whole question of crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. One other initiative that we are using now, we are into right now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I share with you, is the whole question of the DNA. While the DNA may not be directly related, but there is a sort of a nexus between the DNA, because the DNA is there in terms of crime detection, speed up the issue of crime detection. If we do so, then again it would reduce the amount of people who are sent to pre-trial.
Member, your initial 30 minutes has expired. You have an additional 15. Care to use it?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the DNA is one of our long-term initiatives in terms of not only DNA database, but the DNA custodian. And again, this act was there since 2007. It was again during our administration, but amended in 2012. And while it was amended in 2012, again, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, nothing was done. Nothing was done, and there's a very crucial and important part if we need to look at the detection rate in Trinidad and Tobago. The DNA is actually a game changer when we're talking about detection rate. And what we have done thus far, Mr. Deputy Speaker, having identified this as a very major initiative, I'm pleased to report that this project is well underway. The DNA custodian assumed duty, has been hired, and actually took up duty in January 2017, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And he has been working assiduously to operationalize the data bank. So we have the custodian, we have his staff, and now we're working on the data bank itself. And right now we have engaging more than one firms who are there to supply us in terms to assist us in the data bank. Selections should take place in the near future. The regulations have been developed, and in fact, first presented to the Law Review Committee, the LRC, has been completed, to the best of my understanding. So we're moving apace, again, in terms of the DNA custodian and the DNA data bank. We are engaging right now, we are looking at quotations with respect to the buccal swab kit, which are presently before procurement. So once we procure these swab kits with the custodians, with the database, when we start to build the database, again, it will be a game changer in dealing with detection rate, which has, again, a relationship between persons who are incarcerated for pre-trial incarceration and so on. Because if the detection rate is faster, then again, people will be brought to trial in a speedier manner and therefore reduce the fact that they will be sent to remand yard and so on. So you see the nexus, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Again, another initiative by this government, by this ministry, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Let me conclude by saying that the amendments raised in this bill, which seeks to facilitate the change from the use of property as means of providing security for accessing bail to the use up front of deposit for cash or certified check, is just one of many measures, one of many approaches to treat with the whole criminal environment in Trinidad and Tobago. It cannot be viewed in isolation. It must be viewed in totality. There's a number of issues, a number of measures that are being brought. The Attorney General have brought a menu of legislation. Not sweet, I use the word menu, because menu means you can select them eventually, but they all have a taste on its own, but they contribute to the whole. There's a menu of legislation that he has brought. There's a menu that he has brought. And when you put that menu of legislation together with the National Security Trust, then you understand that both of them running on the same track with the same aim in mind to deal with the issues of crime and criminality in the big one. And you're talking about measures, those are measures that you want to look at. Those are effective government. That's the approach that you must see. And that's how we treat with crime and criminality in the Tobago, by a collective approach, whole of government approach. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you very much.
I recognize the member for Oropouche East.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you very much for your recognition, and it's a pleasure to contribute in the House today on this short but to us very significant piece of legislation which the opposition leader spoke to earlier and did indicate our very serious concerns. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've had the opportunity, of course, to listen to the contributions of colleagues opposite, beginning with the Attorney General, the member for Laventille West, I believe, earlier, and then the Minister of National Security. So with your leave, I will like to respond to some of the issues raised in the debate by colleagues opposite. But might I add, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this is a very significant and historic moment as well for us, because we have said, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that if things continue the way they are, many people may need bail. And whether they get it in cash or through certified check or through deeds, many would need bail. Because you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in my introduction, may I announce that a few minutes ago, the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago injuncted the government of Trinidad and Tobago from implementing the property tax. And Mr. Speaker, in passing, let me indicate that the court ruled that the applicant, former Minister Devan Maraj, had an arguable case. And the court indicated at first glance that it may well be that the matters that the government brought by legislation was illegal.
Deputy Speaker, this matter is sub judice.
Member, I trust you'll be moving on now.
The few minutes you allow me in introduction, I wanted to make that point.
Okay, fine. So,
To
proceed.
indicate that with this court
Proceed.
matter, like any other,
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
with this court matter,
Member.
like
standing order.
Member, as I said, proceed. Move
Thank
on
you very much,
to
Mr.
your
Deputy Speaker.
program.
I will move on. I anticipated this, so I will move on.
A lot of people will not need bail now.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, is there a bail provision for persons who refuse to fill out the form to pay property tax? I'm asking. This is an issue of bail. There is a warning from the administration in a press release by the Ministry of Finance that citizens may be committing offences
Mr. Deputy
if
Speaker,
they do not fill out the
standing
form.
order 49,
I'm about
standing order
bail.
48-1.
Member, right, I've given you some leeway. You make mention of the property tax, make the point, come to the point, and then I'll determine as we continue along. Okay?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would inquire from the government the offences that a citizen can commit that are bailable in the event of a failure to submit documents, 13 documents as requested. I'm asking the question, what offences do they commit and under what legislation? And if that is the case, in light of the injunction granted a few minutes ago, would those persons still be committing an offense?
Member for Oropouche East. Member for Oropouche East, I am not going to mention to you again. You have now started your discourse, and I told you to move on. You spoke about the property tax, you spoke about the injunction. Move on kindly.
Deputy Speaker, I will speak only to the issue of bail.
Which is the Bail Act.
Yeah, which is the Bail Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, some matters arose over the last couple of hours, and well, I need to think carefully now before talking. But the tenor of the argument of the Attorney General was that it's very consistent with the approach of the government. The Attorney General's argument, and in fact the Attorney General commended me when after 35 minutes I inquired when he was going to get to the bill. And he took, of course, the 10 minutes remaining to speak directly to the bill. But in his 35 minutes of introduction, that he was well permitted to do, he spoke about the philosophy, the vision, the values, the suite, the menu, the architecture in his 35 minutes before getting to the bill. And there is a certain issue that comes alive here, and it comes alive in other debates as well, is that how do you save money? How do you save money, and how do you raise revenue? And whether it is in speed guns, whether it is in breathalyzer, whether it is in fines, whether it is in taxes, and whether it is in bail, it is the issue of how do you save money and raise money. And this appeared to be a money-saving venture. And I've heard the minister, who I knew some years ago, and the member for Point Fortin has never been a politician, and is still not a politician. And I mean, I say that thing. That doesn't mean that, but it's still not.
We give him some leeway.
But, and the member, because I'm making this point in relation to Lahoketa Talparo, who aspires to be a politician, that you spoke about the difference between law and social sciences, and that's what I'm coming to. The political scientist is also a social scientist, as you know. So that in the social scientists...
Member? No, that's, no, yeah. Member for Couva North, please. South. I'm hearing you clear up on this side. Proceed.
The point I'm making to Point Fortin is that when you root your arguments into how do you save money, how do you spend less, there is a danger that you may take decisions that are not in the long-term interests of institutions or the citizens because you are looking how you save money. And why this is important is because the current Prime Minister of this country, who is now on vacation, I think this is the umpteenth vacation, and many of us think he should not be on vacation, but he should indeed vacate. When the member for Diego Martin West was opposition leader, I want to remind colleagues opposite, he stood on this side of the house and he was very concerned about the amount of food the army eat and the cost of feeding the army. When he became Prime Minister, he was concerned with the cost of roti. And today, there's a cost of prison.
Member, please, relevance, come to the point, tight into the bill.
One of the principles here at work is how do you save money? It is about the prisoner cost, the cost per prisoner. And I'm saying this is consistent because of the leadership of this government. They are concerned with food, they are concerned with keeping people there and paying for people. And today we got the cost of a prisoner, how much it would cost, to keep a prisoner. But 29,000. But that, I believe that you are making a mistake when you look at some of these challenges in relation to the plate of food. How much it costs, whether it's in the army, whether it's in the prison and so on. You may take decisions, and it's the wrong decisions because you are starting from the wrong premise. That's my opening point here this evening. And we continue that argument, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Attorney General, of course, brought all the statistics to tell us that there were 800 and odd persons there and they can access bail. They have bail, they have been accessed bail, but they cannot meet the conditions of bail. But could not go further to tell us why they could not make the conditions of bail, and if they could not make the existing conditions of bail, why do you believe they will have $10,000 to pay to get bail now?
Cash money.
Some of the folks that we talk about here come to our offices as members of parliament. All of you are members of parliament. You meet people going and coming. And people will ask you for $200 to pay the light bill. They will ask you for some help for grocery. If they go to the pharmacy and they see that drugs they can't get now, understand the drugs are no use, they will ask you to help them to get money. These are people for who $200 and $300 is big money. They will not readily have $10,000 to get bail. This assumption that 861 persons or thereabout, a majority of them can get $10,000 Monday morning and come out of the prison system so we don't have to feed them. We don't have to feed them. That is flawed. That is flawed. Now, the member for Laventille West, straining to be as decent as he could, made the point that in well, I think he has run out of locks, but the member for Laventille West made the point that a cabinet decision previously of the partnership spoke to this issue of cash for bail. And as the member for St. Augustine has indicated on the floor and elsewhere, this is a useful policy. This is not a bad policy by itself. This is a policy well worth consideration, and this is why the cabinet, where some of us sat in the cabinet, we were in approval of a policy that deals with cash for bail. But this is a bill you have before us. It's a bill. It's not a draft bill. It's a bill for the parliament to discuss. So we must not confuse policy and law. Don't confuse policy and law. As a policy, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to talk about property tax again because you will, others may be concerned. But there's a difference between policy and implementing policy by way of law. So we may agree on policy, but we disagree in the way it is being implemented, and we have brought the issues to the fore. There's an issue of constitutionality. I'll get to that a bit later. I'll get to that a bit later. The other matter I want to raise concern the use of the prison officers in this case. Now, we are in a situation, the member for San Fernando East, Minister of Housing, will well know, all of us know, the threat that prison officers are under. Many complain about their physical, threat, their safety. In fact, as Minister of Housing, there was no end of approaches by prison officers and their association for housing. Because almost every prison officer believes that he or she under threat. I mean, I don't know if any prison officer believes they're not under threat. Huh? So the Minister of Housing will know of this. I know of it. And at all material times, you try to help the prison association as best as you could with limited. I understand on Wednesday, they gave 31 keys out to members of the protective services. It's not a bad start, but you have much more work to do in that area. As you know, we had given those prison officers and the protective services thousands of housing units. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the prison officers themselves are under threat. The Attorney General came to the House, I think a few months ago, if not a year ago, and indicated that he went to the prison and he took a tour a morning there. And I think he spelled out how much knives they got and how much mobile phone and how much illicit materials they confiscate on this one trip that he took. We were concerned that he himself was not being a party to seizing the materials illegally. So the Attorney General spoke to this matter. Right? It is common knowledge that there are a few, certainly not a majority and not all, prison officers who themselves, questions have been raised about prison officers and their own conduct. That's a matter of public record. Today, you are bringing a law that invites a prison officer to participate in money business, in collecting monies. Oh, I thought it was another 48th one. So you are inviting prison officers now to collect money. Now, in the public service, given the history of our civil service regulations and culture, you have to be very cautious. There are prescribed roles of employees according to their collective agreements, according to their regulations, who are authorized to collect money, whether they are the Comptroller of Accounts building, whether they are the license office, whether they are revenue office or wherever. The regulations of the civil service, their job description, their training, means that they are employees who are authorized to handle monies on behalf of government. Prison officers, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, have never been specific officers handling money. I've never known that prison officers are trained or have been, according to their job description, officers who handle monies. And today, short staff as they are, there's now a human resource management challenge. They are short staff. There's a prison association representing those workers because they are workers under the law. And you are now trying through statute to give them work, to change their job description, that they become officers who handle money. They collect money, and I think they have to go and drop money the next day. Now, what is going to happen when at the prison officers start collecting thousands of dollars? First begin, I don't know, the minister will not tell us because he took 35 minutes with an introduction. Could not tell us whether they have had discussions with the Commissioner of Prisons. They have now put in place new systems. They have a vault for money. They have a cashier desk. They have other, they have maybe a pan with a lock and key to put money in. They have the accounting systems in place. Otherwise, you pass this, and in 6 months, you have $100,000 missing. You have $100,000 missing. Keys went missing. And the minister from Port of Spain North had to stand up and say, we're changing all the locks. Keys went missing. You are now saying thousands and thousands of dollars could be held by prison officers there. We don't know what system is in place, whether they are trained. We don't know whether this is proper under their job description. You see, you could come to Parliament and put in Section 4 of this bill, a prison officer can collect money, you can pass it. But you may be violating at the same time their own regulations, their own job description, what they are trained to do. So the Prison Officers Association must indicate whether or not this is part of their job description, whether they are prepared for this, whether they have the human resource management capacity to deal with this. You are now encouraging other types of criminal offense. You are now encouraging it. And when we look at Schedule 1, I believe it is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look at Schedule 1, you have times for this business. Now we know, of course, prison officers operate on, shift and so on. But now they are going to be collecting money on Saturday. The court, to my knowledge, will not be open on Sunday or Saturday. So that money stays at the prison for a day or two, maybe more, to be deposited in the court. Now, how is money moving from prison to court? Of course, you have to get some kind of armored service or some kind of, again, security arrangements in place to transport money. So, there is a cost to the administration of this. There's a particular cost. So you cut money from food, and now you pay for money for transporting, the money up and down, you pay more to do that, to secure this. And you run this grave risk of further criminal offenses and so on. Because essentially you are going to hold money next to people who are in there for stealing money. That's what you're doing. The other danger with this matter, and it needs to be thought out, is what we are saying. While cash for bail is something that we look at, we find is progressive as a principle, as a policy, isn't in reality, from a point of view, a practical point of view. $10,000 you could get your bail with $10,000, go in the prison and pay it. Your loved one is there. $10,000 for whatever offense and so on, right? Where would someone get this $10,000 if they don't have it? This could encourage further robbery. So you hold up some business near the person, you get the money and you go inside there with $8,000 or whatever and say, look, I reach bail time. Because it can be used now quickly for that purpose. You know, and in this country, Mr. Deputy Speaker, how much murders do we have for the year? 180?
200.
No? 200? I would have been sleeping for the last couple of days. 200 murders? 200 murders in a few months. And people are being murdered for $1 or $2. This is like the Wild Wild West. There was a video on the Facebook the other day. A man went in to line up the KFC. They broke in like the Wild Wild West, like Marshal Dillon in those days, and just shoot the man down there and leave. It looked like the Wild Wild West. I thought it was some make-believe fictitious posting somebody did to make a joke. I couldn't believe it. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when persons are held, as we know, someone might be a suspect for murder, but they are not held for murder. They're held for another offense that is bailable because you want to do something else. So you put the person inside there, they're on remand, bail $10,000 or less. There are 2 accomplices outside, or one we saw in the video. They have to get $10,000 overnight now to get bail. Where that coming from? This thing has to be thought out properly. Now, while we say sometimes with a sarcastic admiration that the Attorney General has, his suite and his architecture and his menu. The Minister from Fortin likes menu. It may be the days at Atlantic LNG and on Borough Day, but he likes the menu. But while we know that there's a menu of options available for the Attorney General, you cannot just come to Parliament with this piece of legislation that is not well thought out. Legislation by VAPs, and say we have to do something, because the problem the government face, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that they have to appear to do something. And in appearing to do something, they are not thinking carefully of what they are doing. And this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, will create problems. Because if you go along to pass this, I don't think it requires a constitutional majority. So you can go along to pass, you have the majority, you can pass this. And then you create this devilish environment where everybody needs $10,000 quickly, and they need it in cash. Section 5. Oh yeah, I'm coming to that, yeah. But as it is stated in the bill now, there is no requirement. Yeah, the bill has no certificate. The bill has no certificate. So this is another case to loss, and I don't want to go back to the case of the last hour. With this, Anand Ram Logan, who won the case an hour ago, could go back and get a next injunction. Mr. Speaker, let me get back to the matter.
Again, you are a seasoned campaigner in the House. Please, let us do not go down that road. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I come to another section of the bill you'll be happy to know. That we have made a serious case here. But first, there was an issue that the member for Laventille West thought was a typographical error or was an error of elegance and so on. But it's not a problem of elegance. In fact, the opposition leader at no time suggested that it was a matter of elegance. And the opposition leader will not use the word elegant in relation to Laventille West. But it is a matter where it speaks specifically to an issue. And I will have to read it because there's a need to understand carefully the business at hand. You see, Madam Speaker, you see, in Section 4 of our amendment bill, and I just want to go to the relevant area. It says, in Section 4, it says, Section 12 of the Act is amended by inserting after Section 4 the following subsections. And then you are free to insert subsections as you want. Right? You are free. But when you go here, they put in a Section 4A, 4B, 4C, but it is clearly in relation to Section 12 of the bill, 12.4. And 12.4 deals with applicants for bail who are unlikely to remain in Trinidad and Tobago. And it says this, I want to just repeat this because, I mean, it may be typographical, but it's still a serious matter if it's typographical. Section 12 of the Act is amended by inserting after subsection 4 the following subsections. And it goes clearly in relation to subsection 4. So if you want, just remove that and put it in as another section of your bill. Take away in relation to subsection 4. So we have absolutely no doubt about the generality of the amendment. Do not make it specific to that because again you could go to court and as you did an hour ago you could lose. So Madam Speaker, the matter at hand is that matter. The other matter related to subsection 17. And that is a matter that is important as well because it cannot be, I mean, in layman language, I do not think it is proper, it is legal to be taking money from someone for purpose A and then by a working of a system using it for purpose B. To put it in a simple term. You cannot be taking money for an express purpose and then use it by the working of a law for another purpose.
Remember, I'll give you a little leeway, but I believe this point has been made by previous speakers on more than one occasion.
Sure.
So you may be bordering on what I would consider tedious repetition. I'll give you a little leeway to develop it in a different way.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Then I would not want to go further into that because I don't want to run that risk at all at this hour. But Madam Speaker, like you, I listen attentively to the Minister of National Security. And the Minister of National Security spoke to us, just to remind the House, he spoke to us about the OPVs, the DNA, dismantling gangs, what he saw on remand yard, electronic monitoring devices. And I feel certain that I'll be able to respond to some of these matters raised by the Minister of National Security. The first concern I have is that every time officials of government or the state go to remand yard, they recommend that everybody else go. As if we yearn for the sight and the smell and if we yearn for that. I want to tell Point Fortin, we take your word. Whatever you see is okay. We don't have to go and see it. Because I remember for a professor as well, in charge of a committee for prison reform, went to remand yard and make a whole story about everybody should go. I really don't think everybody should go. I think we can understand the problem that we face there. And yes, we need to deal with that problem. But will passing this bill in the form it is in now deal with that problem? Will it really deal with that problem? And for the arguments we raised earlier and other speakers raised earlier, I do not believe that. I do not believe that. Although we share the view that a proper investment has to be made to bring, as you say, the refurbishment and the expansion. But I'll remind the Minister on that argument, the former administration invested in the Eastern Correctional Institution, which was today named as one of the institutions by the Attorney General. And the thinking behind that was to remove persons who are convicted from one jail facility, put them into the Eastern Correctional Institute, but also to take persons who will no longer risk. There is a body of prisoners, group of prisoners, who would have been convicted. They are serving 10, 20, 30 years. There's a time at which you will determine that they are no longer persons that will create a risk. They are serving out their time. They have 10 years to go, 5 years to go. Do you know, Mr. Minister, the thinking behind that correctional center was that those prisoners will be removed from the jail. I'll come to you now. Let me just finish it for you and then you'll comment. They would be removed and placed there with a certain intention that it will be for rehabilitation, for skills transfer, to prepare them to return to the society. So your view, your view about the humane nature of this is consistent with our approach. So the investment, our policy, the investment in the Eastern Correctional Institution was meant to remove prisoners from the jail opposite in Aruka, put them into the Eastern Correctional Institute for training, for skills training, to learn maybe small micro-business techniques and so on, so they can come out and become small vendors if necessary, to become plumbers, to become persons fixing stove and air condition and so on, so they could get a job when they come out. And as you create space in the main jail at Aruka, you will take the remand population and move them, you'll get more facilities for them. That was the intention of the Eastern Correctional Institution, where clearly you have space, I believe, for 200 prisoners or so, and currently, unless I'm not mistaken, you probably have 50 prisoners or so. But you wanted me to give way to you, please. Yeah.
I just wanted the Eastern Correction Facilities, in fact, if I recall well, it was actually acquired based on the response to the SOE. That's the initial response. And let me let you know, it is being used now. We do have prisoners there at this point in time. So it is being used. But I know I can't give you the number, but it is being used. But I just want to refresh your memory that it was in fact created based on a response to the SOE. Right?
Could I indicate it could not have been created for that purpose? Because to acquire a place like that, as you would know, would take a year and a half to do it. The state of emergency could not have been planned in 2009. So it was not acquired, but it was used, or the idea was that it could be used for the purpose of a state of emergency as well. So it was not. The intention was to move prisoners from Aruka to Eastern Correctional Institute. And when we were doing that, we were also mindful of the community. We engaged those communities in dialogue to ensure that whatever problems they had, whatever they felt, apprehension about a jail coming in their neighborhood, we would, assure them that there will be no danger.
Yeah. Honourable Member for Oropouche, your original 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you intend to avail it. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. So, Eastern Correctional Institute is a facility that is available to you, made available to you by the former administration. I am happy that you are using it. I would hope you would use the Children's Hospital after the mammoth protest today at Cuba. I hope you will also use that facility as I move along. Madam Speaker, the Minister also spoke about the OPVs. And may I indicate to you on this OPV matter that the recommendation to discontinue that arrangement was made by a technical committee and not politicians. It was made by a technical committee, and I must say by a committee of men and women to whom you are close, and you would have been close in your previous incarnation. So it was based, I have served on the National Security Council, I think for 5 years plus as well. And I can tell you it was based on a technical recommendation about those OPVs. It was not based on a recommendation by politicians. And when that happened, of course, a conflict arose. And there was a dispute that went to arbitration, I believe in London, is it? Yeah. Now, we could not have won that if we were wrong. We could not have won that. So the OPV matter was settled, and I think the government of Trinidad and Tobago got monies. How much? $1 billion. $1.3 billion. Received $1.3 billion returning to us from that arrangement. But it could not have been, that could not have been the case if we had acted wrongly, if we had acted unlawfully. So you rest assured. Now, other boats, and because you were very concerned with your naval security framework, and with your background, I understand that concern, and I understand the concern in the context of arms and ammunition and your current challenges. This is why we made another investment in other boats of another category. And that today, you will be the first to admit, has reaped the rewards of that investment. By the seizure, by the, I think, path-breaking seizure recently of drugs and so on, you will agree with that. Because we also understood the importance of a maritime net. We understood that. So rest assured that the groundwork had been there for you to work with that. Now, it's very instructive. The minister also spoke, Madam Speaker, and like you, I listened attentively to his discourse when he spoke about the electronic monitoring devices. Now, I keep hearing electronic monitoring devices. I'm not hearing electronic monitoring bracelets. I don't know if you are using that interchangeably, or is it another menu of options you have? The same thing. Okay, good. And I thank him for giving the former administration credit for the legislation and the vision. It was not just the legislation, it was the vision of doing it. And that you will continue that. And you will continue that. And you have assured us that notwithstanding the 20 months or so in office, that by the end of this year, we will see the product. So it is going to take some time to cook, but you assure us that something will be baked at the end of this year. And by January next year, rest assured, you will get a question filed on the matter. So the electronic bracelet, electronic devices, as you call it, was also a fundamental policy pillar upon which we were going to deal with this prison crisis of overcrowded prisons, of remand yard problems and so on. Because as you remove persons who are convicted and you move them to another locality, or as the circumstances prescribed, and they can now come out and be monitored electronically, you will get more space in your prison. You will get more space in the prison. Now, as you know, there's a crisis where the Prime Minister has admitted now, after 18 years in public office, that the Port of Spain General Hospital is on its last legs. In fact, it's on stills, I believe. And there's a need for the Port of Spain Hospital to be rebuilt, which we were on to. In fact, the Couva Children's Hospital was meant, along with Mount Hope, to decant the Port of Spain Hospital so we can build a brand new Port of Spain Hospital. And today, by the thousands who came out to that demonstration, it suggests that that hospital should be open and operational at the earliest opportunity. The government should waste no time but to open the Children's Hospital in Couva. And you may well get a court case like today, which you lost, and on an injunction where the court injunct you from putting the property tax to people, so that today you may well get a court case on the Couva Hospital as well. Be warned. But it really, I want to return to that prison problem there. Because, Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Security would be aware by now that the Royal Jail on Frederick Street is in need of not rehabilitation, but I believe closing down completely and being relocated. UDCOT, when we were there, were concerned with that. UDCOT was concerned with that, and we had done some early work on moving, because it has to do with prison reform. It has to do with prison reform. The minister spoke with a bit of passion, I think, a touch of passion, before his final run-up. He spoke with a touch of passion about the humane conditions that were necessary for character formation, if I read him correctly. He was concerned with character formation being the end result of inhumane conditions. And he spoke of that. But one challenge you have there is with this Port of Spain jail. Now, it is, as you know, part of our colonial history. The colonial powers built jail, they built port, they built whatever, so that they can extract from the country raw materials, but they can put you closely so that the constabulary can monitor you, and everything will be convenient in the little town. So if you look at all the Caribbean islands where their city is located, which were formerly towns, their prison, of course, is right there, because it all makes sense. And if you look at the makeup of early town and country planning, you had to put prison close to police, close to court. In those days, they didn't have mass transport and that type of thing. Today, communities were not connected. Today, you may well want to look at the relocation of the Port of Spain jail, which has implications not only for prisoners and conditions and the building itself. I don't know if you're aware that there was an attempt to put what was it, St. Augustine, the electronic doorway in Port of Spain. Yes. And that, you know, we had to buy hair dye when we were finished with that project. It really taxed us, you know, not the property tax, but it taxed us. And that facility has reached the end of the line. Has reached the end of the line, that facility. Apart from that, as you may be aware, in Port of Spain as well, there are town and country planning restrictions on buildings around the jail. So you want to establish business, you want to become Port of Spain financial center of the Caribbean, but you can't go up a certain amount of floors near the jail. You cannot do extensions, you cannot get town and country permission and so on. So the Port of Spain jail relocation project was meant to deal with this prison reform matter and getting a brand new facility which would be adequate and as comfortable as can be for the prison population. So our argument this evening is that while this may appear to be one step towards prison reform and a greater efficiency and maybe a greater human conditions and so on, it is not a significant step at all, because you do not know how much people you are going to target by this. You don't know. You are creating greater problems with money transfers and using prison officers as if they are bank tellers. I am not sure the prison has a vault to keep money like this. You can check and tell us. I'm not sure they even handle cash there. And it is a recipe for disaster when you put money this way in a prison and then ask the same prison officers to transfer it out. There could have been another system. You see, and this is the issue. It's not the policy, you know. It is the operationalization of policy. You could have put another system in place where you grant cash bail, if you so choose, using an independent adjunct institution to the prison. It's done in other countries as well. Create a company for this purpose and allow that company to work with the judiciary and the prison system to handle the sensitivity of money and checks and so on and so on. Now, I ask you an interesting question. When persons come with certified checks by the prison, who checking the check? Who is authorized there to verify that these things are
certified?
These are serious matters. When you go to the bank, there's a process. You are buying a car somewhere, there's a process. There are officers who will do this. Is the prison going to call the bank, whether it's Republican or Saturday, whoever, and say, we just received a check for $10,000 from John Smith. It is a certified, signed by we can't recognize the signature here at all, but could you tell us, please, is the prison officers going to do this? The understaffed prison association that already are under threat? These, sometimes in making law, and we did this at the LRC, when we were in LRC, we did this. The Attorney General and the legal luminaries like St. Augustine and others would come and tell us the law and how they will do it. And we were always concerned, some of us, with walk us through, how do you operationalize that? How will it work? And then we would come with daily examples and say, suppose this happened, what will happen? Suppose this person does this, what will happen? We stress test it, to use another technical term. We stress test the law at the LRC by having the requisite type of composition to do that. And I wonder whether this bill was subject to a stress test. I wonder whether it was subject to a stress test. Because in closing, I know I have a few minutes left. How much? Oh, I have a lot of time. In closing, I want to issue well, I can't advise, but I would say to the Attorney General, be very cautious with these matters. We have raised a critical issue of constitutionality. Attorney General has lost not one, but several cases, including one a few hours ago. The Commissioner of Police. The property tax a few minutes ago, he is asking me to name it, Madam Speaker. I am not being irrelevant, he's invited me.
Well, the thing about it is this, that there is a rule against crosstalk. And I'm certain the member, as seasoned as he is, knows that who he addresses is the chair. So that I would ask you to ignore or rise above all those temptations. And please direct your contribution here.
Do you want me to give for you to ask me the question? So through you, Madam Speaker, I heard in crosstalk that someone asked me to name one. I named the Commissioner of Police order. I named the property tax matter today, a few minutes ago. This could be another case. This could be another case that a real Attorney General in San Fernando takes up. And if they take up this on the basis of those principles raised today, in relation to section 17, I believe, you could find yourself facing the barrel of a gun. Metaphorically. Metaphorically.
Analogy. I don't like that analogy. Please. Yes, good.
You could find yourself in a bad place as an Attorney General, because it is not a good reputation to develop losing cases at court. It's not a good reputation for an Attorney General. So, Madam Speaker, I think those are the few points I wanted to raise at this juncture, and to thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to bring this debate to a close. Regrettably, the difficulty is having to respond to the last speaker. You know, sometimes when you have a long day, an intermission of comedy, reflection, is often what people bring out. And I thank the honourable member for bringing the levity. I mean, after all, when one contributes and has to stop constantly to laugh at one's own jokes, clearly the debate tells you that it's going in the wrong direction. It's a constant habit of Oropouche East. But anyway, Madam Speaker, there are very few issues raised collectively by the members opposite. Very, very few issues. And I propose to address them. Number one, the member for Siparia stood, with all sincerity, said that essentially this was a, and I use the word she used, it was a dotish bill. Replete with condemnation of the lack of focus, bad drafting. At the end of it, listening to the honourable member for Siparia, one would have the certain impression, one would be drawn to the inexorable conclusion that the opposition could never have come up with legislation as brought to this Parliament. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to tell you that I have confirmation from the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel that the very form of bill that we're dealing with today was confirmed on June the 1st, 2015 in its exact fashion by the members now sitting opposite. But when you look at Oropouche East and you listen to the jocular fashion, the condemnation, the scorn poured on the legislation, you listen to the honourable member for Siparia talk about dotishness. Madam Speaker, thank God there are written records in this country which could actually tell the citizens of this country that you must not believe everything that people say, especially those opposite. Let me give you an example. Again, with the contribution of Oropouche East.
Will you give way, please, Attorney General?
70 children, in fact, is the bed count at the Couva Hospital, because he spoke about the Couva Hospital. 70 to 80 beds are the bed count for adults at the Couva General Hospital, the Children's Hospital as they call it. The Port of Spain Hospital has a bed count when you're not at overcapacity and it's constantly there, 450 beds. The honourable member for Oropouche East stands up with a straight face. Well, yes, we knew that. We were going to use it as a decanting centre. 450 people going to move into 70 children's beds and 80 adult beds. The honourable member for St. Joseph, the Minister of Health, confirmed to me that a team went down to the Couva Hospital, and that team comprised the North Central Regional Health Authority and the Northwest Regional Health Authority, led by Andy Bagwandas, and they confirmed that there was no way on earth that that could have happened. But Oropouche East, as he's wont to do, stands up here with aplomb, laughing at himself halfway through the presentation to tell us, yes, they knew everything. You see, it comes right down to this bill. Because when we look to a written policy document attached to a cabinet minute and note, the honourable member for Laventille West referred to it, but I want to centre upon it. The Cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the 4th of March 2013 considered a policy document for adoption for amendment of the Bail Act Chapter 460. It confirmed its decision that the policy be adopted on the 14th of March 2013, and the policy document squarely deals with the very policy that has caused the production of this bill. This bill was confirmed by an LRC chaired by no less a person than members sitting opposite. The confirmation coming from the office of the CPC today in writing. And, Madam Speaker, the policy document itself deals with cash, deals with prison officers accepting money, deals with security. But we heard Oropouche East a little while ago, in between his laughter at his own contribution, stand up and tell us, so prisons officers going to become cash tellers. Them is bank tellers. Words to that effect. Listen to what page 8 of the policy document approved by the UNC cabinet says. Where the defendant accused is granted bail but can only satisfy bail after banking hours, he may pay the bail amount set to an officer appointed by the Commissioner of Prisons to receive bail monies at the prison. I'll stop right there.
Yes.
No. Oh, procedure. Oh, sorry.
May I? Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 15.5, I beg to move that the House continue to sit until the completion of the Attorney General's contribution.
Honourable members, the question is that the House continue to sit until the completion of the contribution by the Attorney General. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So there was Oropouche East a little while ago, mid-laughter. Prisons officers going to be bank tellers. He sat on the National Security Council, the honourable member, sat as the leader of government business, sat in the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, approved a policy on the 7th of March 2013, confirmed the policy on the 14th of March 2013, and in the policy document it says in black and white that it will receive monies at the prison. So we are to now take Oropouche East seriously yet again. You see, Madam Speaker, Oropouche East is a special brand of politician, but not surprising. Madam Speaker, we heard the Honourable Leader of the Opposition go to town. Jurisdictions around the world, she said, Honourable Member, are moving away from the system of cash deposit. Jurisdictions around the world. Madam Speaker, we had a very close look at what the Honourable Member had to say. Jurisdictions that actually use the cash deposit system, where the exercise of that system is now in dispute, stand as two in number. One, the United States of America, where only some of the states of the US use it, and two, the Philippines. Two jurisdictions. As a matter of fact, the Honourable Member said that people are going to use this cash system, and what they're going to do, they're going to run down people, etc. Madam Speaker, a bail bond, which is the method of cash deposit that the Honourable Member was referring to in one of two jurisdictions, which is the United States, is a very particularly organized system. Number one, the cash deposits are accepted by a licensed bailor. That licensed bailor, and you heard Oropouche West say it, that licensed bailor takes a 10% fee, secures that bail by a bail bond, including the ability and ambit to broaden it with a mortgage over real or personal property. That licensed bail bond is a regulated system at local, state level, and at federal level. That licensed bail bond system allows bail bond agents to go off by debt hunting arrangements where they hunt you down, they can take you to court, on a civil debt for recovery of the amount done. They do it as a fee for profit. But Madam Speaker, just so, make it up as you go. The UNC says, why are we doing this now? The world is running away from this. Well, the world has two countries. The United States is having a discussion on it. And in the United States is a licensed bail bond system where you're allowed to take a 10% fee, where you're allowed to hypothecate it, you're allowed to give a mortgage, you're allowed to have a bail bond agent hunt you down, bounty hunter style. But Madam Speaker, our act says the exact opposite. Because it's as if members can't read. With the greatest of respect, make it up as you go, and don't worry what's in the written word, Oropouche East style. So let's look at the act. The act itself, the Bail Act, in black and white since 1994, small amount of time, amended 12 times in the history, amended umpteen times by members, including when Oropouche sat on joint select committees to deal with the bail amendments. Right there it says, Section 18, offense of agreeing to indemnify surety in criminal proceedings. And Section 19, offense to stand surety on consideration of property being used as security. You know what that means, Madam Speaker? It means you cannot do the bail bond system like the United States of America because it is criminalized. Oh, for heaven's sake, at least have the courtesy to read the law.
I didn't read it.
For heaven's sake. And for the record, there was an application to the court this afternoon for leave for judicial review on the property tax matter. Leave was granted. I'm not discussing the subject matter, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member raised it while you were out of the chair.
While I may have been out of the chair, I was within hearing of the chamber. There was mention of injunction granted by the court, and repeatedly throughout the presentation there was reference. So I will allow you to just respond to that very carefully.
And for the record, the matter is being appealed. It is on at 9 a.m. on Monday, and it is merely on the lowest rung of the ladder, leave to appeal. And I take no comfort in the honourable members directing this government on any aspect of the law, because they were convinced that election petitions were going to happen. We went all the way to the Court of Appeal so that they could say they didn't lose an election which they actually lost. The judicial process will take its course, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, similarly, there certainly wasn't, as the Honourable Member for Oropouche East put it, any loss on any Commissioner of Police case. There was a judicial interpretation, and the matter didn't affect the substance of the order, which is why it wasn't even appealed. So that's a storm in a teacup all by itself. Madam Speaker, so coming down now to the brass tacks and the sheer shamefacedness that should exist by members opposite to actually read the law that they're drawing reference to. The fact is, we do not have... I think the member was tripping. Honourable Madam Speaker, perhaps. I didn't hear that clearly. Madam Speaker, the fact is that the law as it currently stands at Section 18 and 19 of the Bail Act, Chapter 460, which has been around for 20 plus years, makes an absolute legal nonsense of the entire contribution of members opposite, several of them, that jurisdictions are moving away from cash bonds. You're comparing apples with watermelons. You're comparing horses with humans. It just does not make sense. And Madam Speaker, most respectfully, it's downright embarrassing. Madam Speaker, there were a couple other points raised by honourable members opposite. In particular,
part of the chamber, I would just like you all to know that your voices are extremely audible on the television. I'm sure you don't intend that. Please continue, Attorney General.
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, honorable members gave a song and a dance, literally. In Oropouche East's case, lots of laughter at his own jokes. But when we look at the section 12, that is the refrain, it's the truth. Laughing at yourself. When we look at section 12, Madam Speaker, in clause 4, members opposite went on to complain that the insertion of the provisions into the body of clause 12 in the location that it did had to be read ad justem generis. They said that persons who were required to give security were confined to a narrow class set out at subclause 4, which is persons who were required to give security as there was some risk that it would be unlikely for them to remain in Trinidad and Tobago. Yet, coming out of the mouth of a seasoned practitioner, like my learned friend from St. Augustine, we heard him give a tale of a client who he didn't name, a police officer, he said, who couldn't arrange his land and deed for the purposes of the bail application. And thank God there was somebody in court to give the surety, etc. for him. Well, why on earth was a deed being offered there for an average policeman? Where was the risk of that person getting out of the jurisdiction? You see, Madam Speaker, they don't really think about what's coming out of their mouths, you know.
Okay.
The fact is that in the vast majority of cases, Trinidad and Tobago being an island in the CARICOM with free movement, where there's a mere couple $100 or a little bit of money to leave this jurisdiction to go Grenada or take a boat to go Venezuela, there is a risk of travel out of the jurisdiction on a constant basis. And for that reason, it is by far not the exception to the rule that section 12(4) of the Parent Act is often invoked so that you're required to give security in the form of land security. That's the norm. But yet members tell us, no, it is to make judicial nonsense. Or legislature would be exercising itself in futility. Not only does it come from the very policy which their cabinet accepted, from a draft of a bill which their LRC accepted, but Madam Speaker, it doesn't bear resemblance to the actual practice in the courts. And that's a fact. You see, Madam Speaker, we consulted, as I indicated earlier, but one of the entities to actually respond was the judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago. And when we looked to the practice in the magistracy in particular, we clearly saw that this is a potential for exploring the opportunities available for improving the access to bail. Now, Madam Speaker, a lot of people said, Oropouche East again, in between his comic relief to himself, went on to say that people essentially going to put on a walk to get the money overnight. How are they going to get the money, the $10,000? Well, the fact is, St. Augustine gave us an acknowledgement of what all of us know. The professional bailers. The professional bailers are accepting in contravention of Section 18 and Section 19 of the Bail Act their 10% fee. They are acting like unlicensed bailers in the United States of America. Yet, where do they get the 10% money from? Where they putting on a walk to get the 10% money from? St. Augustine said, if it's $1 million bail and 10% is $100,000. If it's $500,000, where does the money come from? Where does the money come from to pay the practitioners in the criminal justice arena? Is that money disclosed? Wouldn't it be sensible to agree that if one had to wait on a professional bailer and leave the system as it is, that what you're inviting people to do, that 71% of people who have been granted bail, 800 plus people granted bail and can't get out because they have no land. So what are we going to do? Let them save, chirrup, buy a piece of land in about 20 years' time and then get out? Because the statistics show us that that's what's going on. On the other hand, Madam Speaker, most respectfully, where you're providing the provision for a financial institution to allow for a bond to be placed, or for some other form of immovable security, or for cash, or for certified check, aren't we saying it's by far a better system to get rid of the 10% undeclared to the professional bailer, give that money, whatever it may be, to the court or to a licensed institution, hypothecate the security by way of the bond or the immovable security or other form of security, which this law now contemplates in a rather radical and beneficial way for the citizens of this country. But that way we get rid of the professional bailer. And we have a declaration of source of income. And that deals with money laundering. That deals with proceeds of crime. That allows a track of who procured the money. Because the professional bailer is the one that comes and stands up in the court, not the man who put on the work for the $10,000. So leave the system as it is, honorable members opposite say, and leave it in darkness, shrouded in secrecy. Let's acknowledge an open breach of Section 18 and Section 19. But that's okay. Don't do as we say. Don't change nothing. Let's talk some more. Come back with a holistic review. Wheel and come again. And if you go Oropouche East style, laugh at yourself several times while you're saying that. You see, Madam Speaker, the fact is, for the people who are incarcerated, there is not only a cost, financial cost, there's an emotional cost, there's a systemic cost. They can be put into conditional release conditions where there's better operationalization. Oropouche East was talking big and bold just now. That's why we were doing electronic monitoring. You know what the title of that bill is? If you check the Parliament website, Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring 2011 Bill. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, we in 17. Nothing goes on. But we come in, we're doing, let's go back. But plenty money spent under the last regime, you know. $400 billion by the time you take off the book lending. I heard a speech in the Senate the other night where the Honorable Minister for Agriculture was saying it was like when you go out to dinner. You go out to a place, you're buying food, a whole set of people there, liming with your partners, and then you realize they stick you with the bill. Well, they stick us with the bill. Spend. So, Madam Speaker, with the greatest of respect to honorable members opposite, to the people who are languishing in remand, I think it would be by far better a situation to compliment the Honorable Minister of National Security for finally operationalizing the electronic monitoring, for finally putting the vessels, the OPVs, into operation, because the idea was not which vessel better, but was actually putting them into operation. And Madam Speaker, it is very noteworthy that members say Trinidad and Tobago won the arbitration with the OPVs and BAE. Well, I can tell you now, standing as Attorney General, that certainly is not the case. And that technical team that the Honourable Member for Oropouche East is talking about, that decided that these were effectively lemons that could not be purchased. Well, the government of Brazil bought all the vessels, and BAE now calls these vessels their Trinidad-class vessels. So only this team and only the National Security Council, of which Oropouche East was a member, only they got it right. The whole government of Brazil, the whole of the United Kingdom, the Trinidad-class vessels, all of that is just nonsense. We must listen to Oropouche East. No wonder he persists to laugh at himself all the time.
Making joke.
Can't help it. I would laugh at myself if I was saying what he had to say. Madam Speaker, Oropouche East talked about comfortable jails. I think he's on to something there. But I wouldn't go much further. I wouldn't go much further just yet. So, Madam Speaker, the other issue on the table is whether there's an unconstitutionality. And members are talking about a deprivation of property. In particular, in Clause 5 of the bill, which seeks to amend Section 17 of the Act, honourable members are expressing the view that there is a deprivation position. Madam Speaker, it's incumbent to put on the record that Section 17 of the Act itself, before amendment, literally 17.1 stands as it is. Listen to what 17.1 says. Where a person has given security in pursuance of Section 12.4 and the court is satisfied that he failed to surrender to custody, then, unless it appears that he had reasonable cause for his failure, the court may order the forfeiture of the security. It's the existing law right now, unamended. Subclause 2, which we now propose to amend by bifurcating it to deal with the circumstances of the new methods, go no further in jeopardy than subclause 1, but go further in the right direction of constitutionality by saying in subclause B that there's now a show cause provision as to why the forfeited security or part thereof should be returned. This clause 2 of the existing law, which is being replaced, read as follows. Where a court orders the forfeiture of security under subsection 1, the court may declare that the forfeiture extends to such amount less than the full value of the security as it thinks fit to order. Full stop. No show cause, no due process, no anything. So are the honourable members telling us that after they proceeded to amend the legislation in 2011 by Act number 9, Act number 11 of 2011, Act number 12 of 2012, Act number 1 of 2014, Act number 7 of 2015, on 5 occasions, the members of the opposition amended the Bail Act, Chapter 460. They come today to complain about Section 17, saying it's unconstitutional, and not once did they bother to address that. Not once in 5 occasions of moving the House and 5 occasions of moving the Senate and going to a Joint Select Committee was it raised. But today, we had to listen to them tell us that it's unconstitutional. Oropouche is gone. Siparia, gone. St. Augustine, quiet, holding on his head in shame. So, Madam Speaker, that includes Act number 7 of 2008, Act number 25 of 2007, Act number 15 of 2007, Act number 10 of 2007, Act number 30 of 2006, Act number 32 of 2005, Act number 19 of 2005, because there were sunset clauses in those bills, and honourable members who still sit in this House participated in those debates, and you know what they had to say about constitutionality of Section 17? Absolutely nothing. 12 times. 12 times in this Parliament. And Siparia was a member on each of those occasions. Carney East was a member on each of those occasions. Oropouche East was a member right here, boasting today that he was in the Senate. So 12 times he had nothing to say, but all of a sudden, laughing at himself, Oropouche East comes up again. You see, Madam Speaker, I am on this constant refrain of the manner in which people deal with this, because you just can't take them seriously. No acknowledgement for the fact that there's a show cause this time. But you know what? If we were to take even an iota of common sense out of what they're saying, the one point of merit that I heard today was the potential for including the election by the defendant for the position of forfeiture by consent. There may be merit in that, which we undertake to look at. But certainly, we don't derogate any further than the existing law. In fact, we improve it. So, Madam Speaker, try as I may to have suffered through the presentations of my learned colleagues opposite. Try as I may to have watched them say with aplomb all of the things that just don't stand up to scrutiny and truth. Those are just the simple points for answer today. Nothing more, nothing less. Comparing apples with oranges, not reading the law properly, laughing at oneself constantly while others in fact join him. But Madam Speaker, the fact is that this is beneficial for the citizens of this country. It is associated with a proper plan. And I'm hearing Oropouche East say, tell Anand. I wonder why he was fired. I wonder why Anand Ramlogan was fired by the last government.
Because he was the best.
And I wonder if he was that successful, why they lost the election petitions. You see, Madam Speaker, I take no comfort, you know. God forbid. That kind of dealing I don't want. Madam Speaker, what I can say is that this is good and solid law, and I recommend that this bill go for the benefit of the citizens of this country forward into the books of this country by the amendments that we propose. I beg to move.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to Friday, the 26th of May, 2017, at 1:30 p.m. Madam Speaker, that is Private Members' Day. We have not heard as yet what will be done on that day, and I will give way before I complete what I'm saying.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Leader of Government Business, we have proposed to do motion number 3 on our business, moved by the member Fernando.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the member for point of order. So, Madam Speaker, we will do motion number 3 as stated by the member for point of order. And Madam Speaker, after that, we will move on to do government business, and we will do motion number 1. We will do the committee stage of the bill that is now before the House, and we will do another motion on that day, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, if I can interject, I'd just like to state for the record that Private Members' Day is our day, and the opposition objecting doing any other business on that day. In keeping with 15.1, Madam Speaker, and I want to quote 15.1, just the end. The House shall not adjourn earlier than 6 p.m., but that does not mean that Private Members' Day has to end at 6 p.m. So I object strongly about conducting any other business than Private Members' Day.
All right, members, as far as the point made by the whip, all that the standing orders provide is that the Private Members' Day will have precedence on that particular day up to 6 p.m. It doesn't say that the sitting of the House ends at 6 p.m. Okay, and I so rule. Okay, so that I believe I'm on my legs. Okay, and no, I sat really to allow members to contain themselves. Okay? And I have said, I have ruled, I don't know what is the practice. I know what the standing orders say. All right? And the private members there, the private members have precedence up to 6 p.m. It does not say that the sitting of the House ends at 6 p.m. All right? And as I said, I so rule. Now, there are some matters that qualify on the adjournment. There are 2. I believe what I've been told is that by agreement, the second motion, which is by member for Barataria San Juan, has been agreed to be deferred. Leader of the House, is that so?
Madam Speaker, yes.
Whip, is that so? Yes. Yes, please. So I now call on the member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me first take the opportunity to thank you for the opportunity to advance this motion, namely the findings of 2 independent sets of testings on the wells of the seal structure at the Brian Lara Stadium contained in the report of the Commission of Inquiry into the construction sector of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the issues surrounding the Brian Lara Stadium has been long and varied. Madam Speaker, it has been shrouded in massive amounts of waste, massive amounts of mismanagement, and massive amounts of corruption. Madam Speaker, this project started under previous PNM administration in the year 2005. It was then promised for the Cricket World Cup that occurred in 2007. Madam Speaker, it is well known that Cricket World Cup 2007 came, it left, it met us with another World Cup, and still no Brian Lara Stadium. Madam Speaker, I want to deal specifically with the structural and the engineering issues as identified in the motion. And Madam Speaker, I saw the Honourable Member for Diego Martin Central, together with the Chairman of UDICOT. In one day, 2 press conferences were held to refute claims and allegations that were substantiated by evidence contained in the Commission of Inquiry, which was informed by the Aaron Bush report of 2009 and the McCaffrey report of 2009. Madam Speaker,
Caroni East, while I know the member for Princestown has the great ability to throw his voice and fill this chamber, I again advise you, at the point at which you sit, your voice will carry more volume on the television. I advise all members at the lower part, a practice is developing that when I stand, people speak as if we're in a conversation. Unfortunately, we're not. All right? All members at the lower part of the chamber, their voices carry louder than the speaker on the television. I don't think it is fair to the member of Princestown. Please continue.
thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in dealing with the actual structural and engineering issues that surround the wells on the Brian Lara Stadium, I am almost certain that my friend from San Fernando East who will respond to me will raise the Aaron Bush report that was commissioned in 2012. But I want to indicate to the member for San Fernando East that if that is the basis of his entire argument, he must then tell this country whether or not he's aware of the Aaron Bush report that was contained in 2009 that first advised Trinidad and Tobago that the wells on that stadium had failed 2 sets of independent testing. You see, Madam Speaker, on March 22nd, 2009, in a Newsday front page article entitled Brian Lara Stadium Built on Condemned Steel by Andre Bargo, it read, "The structural steelwork," and I quote, "on the $900 million Brian Lara Stadium project at Taruba is effectively condemned." According to a report into the UDICOT project prepared by Jerry McCaffrey, the construction expert hired by the Commission of Inquiry, whose future participation in the inquiry has also now been cast in doubt. You see, Madam Speaker, the article further went on to say, and I quote, "I have asked UDICOT for a position statement on this issue. I understand 0 roof wells have been inspected or tested. Access was not made available," he noted in a preliminary report. McCaffrey also noted a series of findings into the structural works on the project contained in a separate report, which was prepared by structural engineer who? Aaron Bush, who they will now depend on in 2012, that tells them that the stadium is fit for purpose, but never refuted or absolved the first claims made in the 2008-2009 report. Madam Speaker, it goes on to say, the Bush report, according to McCaffrey, contained allegations that there were problems of mistakes in design, assumptions, material incompleteness of design, and an issue of inexperienced designers proposing impractical construction details having undue complexity. Madam Speaker, this is where it gets very interesting in this article. It says, and I quote, "UDICOT lawyers in the inquiry have argued that the Bush report is subject to legal privileges." and therefore it was never placed in the public domain. So, Madam Speaker, we see in the 2008 Aaron Bush report, which informed the McCaffrey report, which was part of the Off Commission of Inquiry, that they said one thing in 2008, then in 2012, my friend comes out from Diego Martin Central and the chairman of Sport TT and Udicott to say, well, it says fit for purpose. Madam Speaker, at no point did the Aaron Bush report of 2008 or the Aaron Bush report of 2012 absolve or refute the claims of the McCaffrey report as contained in the Off Commission of Inquiry with respect to the wells. Now, Madam Speaker, the motion deals with the wells of the stadium. And let me go into a little bit of the details with respect to how wells are measured and tested. There are several areas that were identified in the McCaffrey report. It spoke about the air or a draft of some kind disturbs the delivery of the shielding gas during the welding process, identified and dealt with in the McCaffrey report of 2009. The presence of moisture can lead to problems. Again, with respect to the wells, identified and dealt with in the McCaffrey report of 2009. Plugged or restricted gas metal arc welding gun nozzles, typically from weld spatter, impede the delivery of shielding gas. Again, identified in the report and not refuted or absolved in any other findings. Madam Speaker, it speaks about the paint, grease, oil, glue, and sweat release large amounts of gas when exposed to arc welding temperatures and also temperatures with respect to climate temperatures. Madam Speaker, it goes on to say, when mill scale and rust are welded over, decomposition gases are formed and oxidation begins. It also speaks about plating compounds with zinc. It speaks about the gas flow being too high, a pinch or smash gas hose, improper use of anti-spatter compounds, weld filler metals contaminated with paint, grease, oil, tape, and glue. Contaminated GMAW gun liners can introduce unwanted elements to the well pool. GMAW right on the edge of an outside corner joint.
Am I hearing a device? Am I hearing a device? Could you remember whose device has gone out? Please leave the chamber.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, two of the last findings dealt with if the well joint is opened at the root, it will suck in air from the back. Unprotected liquid metal can absorb air easily. The welding gas itself could be contaminated. A contaminated gas hose could also be the culprit, but also if the materials involved, especially the steel, these problems will continue to exist. Madam Speaker, when I take my seat today, I just have one burning question that I'm hoping that the member for San Fernando East will be able to tell us. And that is, how many additional testings were done to the wells of the stadium before the Brian Lara Stadium was opened? Did third sets of independent testings take place? Did fourth sets of independent testings take place? Did fifth sets of tests take place? Did sixth sets of tests take place? And if those tests took place, we demand, as part of the opposition, I demand on behalf of the opposition and all those that are concerned with this Brian Lara Stadium, that you put the results of those third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh sets of independent testings that refute and absolve the claims contained in the Jerry McCaffrey report into the public domain. You see, Madam Speaker, my friend from Diego Martin Central and the chairman of Udicott ran out to say that Padarat is not telling the truth. But they did not say, Madam Speaker, they did not come out and say, and thank you from my friend from San Fernando West, they did not come out and say at what point in the Aaron Bush report of 2012 did it absolve or did it refute the claims contained in the Off Commission of Inquiry. You know, Madam Speaker, the AG said it's been a long day. And we engaged today in a massive exercise on standing up for the rights of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why I'm here this evening, to ensure that all the matters related to that stadium, Madam Speaker, I'm advised the day it was open, there were still structural issues, there were drainage issues, there were parts of the facility that was actually flooded that could not be used. When they come and they say that at least half the facility was filled, Madam Speaker, that is a total untruth. By their own admission, half of the facility remained unfilled up to 11 in the night. Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member, your speaking time is now spent.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The The Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity, and I promise you I will not shout. Madam Speaker, before I answer the member for Princestown, allow me to put on the parliamentary record my sincere congratulations and commendation to the member for Diego Martin Central and Minister of Sport for an outstanding official opening of the Brian Lara Stadium. Madam Speaker, by that same token, allow me to congratulate the sport company, the Ministry of Sport, as well as the management and the board of UDICOT for bringing this stadium to completion. Madam Speaker, let me just quote some numbers from the attendance. Madam Speaker, the member for Princestown spoke about flood, but Madam Speaker, the event was a success. And notwithstanding the mayhem that certain sections of the population tried to create, the stadium was flooded with persons. 11,000 patrons. Madam Speaker, 11,000 patrons.
You had my full ear and you captured the full volume of the chamber. Please now. Continue, Minister for Housing and Urban Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm told that $750,000 was generated from ticket sales, party stand rentals, and general sponsorship. And Madam Speaker, let me just say I thank you for the opportunity to respond to the member for Princestown, because for the past few weeks he has been trying to create fear and panic in the population, which now appears to be the modus operandi of the opposition. Madam Speaker, questions were asked and questions were answered on this stadium, Madam Speaker. But I have the opportunity now to answer the member for Princestown. Madam Speaker, the stadium was started in 2005, and since then it has been mired in controversy. Madam Speaker, the stadium was the subject in 2009 of the Off Commission. And in assisting the commission, Mr. McCaffrey delivered a report. His initial report dated 20th of February 2009 under section 5, item 531, causes of delay. Mr. McCaffrey stated, and Madam Speaker, he prefaced his statement with the words, "I am advised." He wrote, as of January 2009, the structural steelwork is effectively condemned as two separate independent testing companies tested a significant portion of the wells. The average failure rate is 78.5%. Madam Speaker, from the McCaffrey report, I have not been able to ascertain where those independent reports came from, as cited by Mr. McCaffrey, nor have I been able to ascertain who he would have spoken to in coming up with his report. But Madam Speaker, in any event, in construction, the world of construction, where a contractor is undertaking construction works, there will be independent testing on those construction works. And where a weld has failed, you know what the contractor does? He chips it out and he re-welds. That's all that happens. He re-welds. And then another testing firm comes and tests and determines whether those wells have passed scrutiny or not. Madam Speaker, between the period 2008 to 2010, this is exactly what was done by the contractor, Hafiz Karamat. He would have taken corrective action and independent re-inspection and testing to the wells by the firm in Cortec. And Madam Speaker, I understand the difficulty for the member of Princestown. I would have expected, as a former Minister of Housing, the member for Oropouche East would have told him, Madam Speaker, this is all the tests here, all the reports in Cortec. I'm not sure why the member for Oropouche would not have told you, but all are there. Madam Speaker, the well certificates and the well maps. Madam Speaker, 2 sets of testing were done. ultrasonic testing on the butt wells, Madam Speaker, and on the fillet wells. And Madam Speaker, all the tests were done to all the wells and they were certified. Between 2008 to 2010. That is the missing piece to your puzzle. Madam Speaker, shortly after May 2010, the project was halted by the People's Partnership and left in abeyance, Madam Speaker. And notwithstanding that, Madam Speaker, the government, by their public pronouncements, committed to complete the stadium, and every time the former minister spoke, the price to complete went up. Madam Speaker, at one time, it was 150 million. Another time, it was 185 million. It ended at 200 million. And Madam Speaker, it was not touched. Madam Speaker, fast forward to 2013. UDCOT would have commissioned, under the member for Oropouche East, the Aaron Butch report to conduct an independent review of the entire facility. And Madam Speaker, Aaron Butch is not a welding inspector. Aaron Butch would have relied on these same reports from in-court tech to come up with his determination. And Madam Speaker, it is noteworthy to report that in 2013, in the Aaron Butch report on page 2, part 2, page 11, it is expressly stated that the stadium structures were approved by Aaron Butch as fit for purpose. And the member for Oropouche East knows this. I'm not sure why he would not have told you. Madam Speaker, considering the public funds that was already sunk into this project, it was unconscionable for this administration to just left it to deteriorate further. So, Madam Speaker, in September 2015, the government took the decision and ensured that refurbishment work on the project was conducted so that this facility could be reopened and able to serve its intended purpose. As such, UDCOT was tasked with completing this project at a budget cost of 90 million. And Madam Speaker, I'm very happy to announce that it was done for less than 90 million. Madam Speaker, some additional works were needed. Civil and structural works, renovation to the facility's roof, sheeting on 9 roof canopies, complete relaying of the field, installation of security and decorative fencing, installation of turnstile handrails, replacement of stolen electrical cables, reinstallation of 10,000 seats, which was stolen and vandalized when it was left in abeyance, installation of a digital scoreboard. Madam Speaker, all the works have been completed and all the defects have been remedied and certified by the project's consultants and engineers. And further, Madam Speaker, prior to the official opening, UDCOT and sporting officials have tested and monitored various aspects of the facility, including the pitches, media center, lighting, public address system, public access, egress from the facility, seating, restroom, and concession stands. And in closing, Madam Speaker, allow me again to acknowledge the Minister of Sport and UDCOT, as well as the various consultants and contractors who were instrumental in completing this world-class facility for all to enjoy. And I thank all the cricket fans who attended the formal opening on May the 13th as we opened the state-of-the-art facility. And Madam Speaker, in further commendation to UDCOT, I wish to echo the comments from the 2016 Joint Select Committee report on state enterprises, which stated, the corporation, UDCOT, has faced a myriad of challenges in the past, but it has also demonstrated its commitment to being government's primary developer of choice, and arising from the recommendations of the UF Commission, has made a commitment to focus on integrity, transparency, accountability, and value for money in its policies and procedures. Madam Speaker, under this PNM-led administration, UDCOT will adhere to the principles of good governance, will be transparent, accountable, and would provide value for money in all of its projects and activities. Madam Speaker, with those words, I thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Friday, 26th May 2017 at 1:30 p.m. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Friday. This House now stands adjourned to Friday, 26 May 2017 at 1:30 p.m.